microphone. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order today's Regional Council meeting. Chair Dale is not joining us today due to a personal matter, so unfortunately you're stuck with me. Before I do the roll, and you're all to be on your best behavior, please. Before I do the roll call, I will call upon Acting Mayor for the City of Mississauga, Councillor Karen Raz, to make an introduction.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we know, the Ward 1 seat in Mississauga was declared vacant on January 24th after Councillor Tovey unfortunately passed away from a medical issue while driving home from one of our planning meetings. Yesterday, we had the privilege of appointing our new councillor, David Cook, well, kind of a new old councillor, to fill the interim position for Ward 1. For those of you who are not familiar with Councillor Cook, he served for Ward 7 for 3 terms, from 1980 to 1988, and in 2010, you did run against our former mayor, Hazel McCallion, and but you gave it the old college try. So you're a longtime resident of Ward 1 and the author of many books celebrating the history of Mississauga. So welcome, Councillor Cook, and I will hand it over to you if you'd like to say a couple of words. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Your comment about age is right on. I am a little bit older than I think most people think. I've lived in Mississauga for 65 years. My father was born there, and I've always been interested in the history and with that, the political process of our great city and our great region. I grew up in Malton, and interestingly enough, people don't know this, but I went to school with Jim Tovey's brother in Malton. And my father owned farmland down there where the airport is, and when we got kicked out because they wanted to expand the airport, we moved back to my father's birthplace, which is now called Applewood Acres. And I grew up there as a teenager and then eventually into radio here in Brampton. I worked at CHIC Brampton. That was CHIC where the girls are. There was all female announcers except the men who did the news. And I worked there for a number of years, and then my boss, Roger Abbott, who went on to become a star in This Hour Has 22 Days, or 22 days I think it was, he moved to Toronto Radio and ended up taking me down to Toronto Radio, and I spent a number of years there. Then into the newspaper business after radio, which led to my career in politics. So I'm happy to be back, and I hope to work well with everybody. My main concern being here is, of course, to continue the projects that the late councillor had started. I feel strongly about them, and I know about them all. In fact, last night until 9 o'clock, I was with the Homeowners Association in Brampton and the developer of the Port Credit Inspiration Project. And so I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to here at the region. Just another to finish off here, the chairman of the region, I knew him when he was an employee here at the region, and I knew his father. And I used to go to his father's cottage up in the Barrie area. So I have a long history both with the city and the region, and I'm really happy to be back and looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
Welcome, Councillor Cook. When I introduced myself this morning, I asked if you had your inaugural speech ready, and you said that wouldn't be a problem. You were true to your word. I see Councillor Starr on the board.
All I want to do is comment is that you've got 3 former and present Ward 7 councillors from the city of Mississauga at this table now. Because I was there in 1978.
So today's about the history of Peel. Thank you very much, and welcome, Councillor Cook. At this point, I'll do the roll call, and all members of council are present, with the exception of Mayor Crombie and Councillor Kovac. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest this morning? Seeing none. Just prior to the approval of the agenda, do I have to sign this?
Just the approval of the minutes.
I apologize. Approval of the minutes. Moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Fonseca. All in favor? That's carried. Just prior to calling for approval of the agenda, there are some additions. Item 16.2 is, that the agenda for the February 22nd Regional Council meeting include a communication from the City of Mississauga regarding the appointment to fill the vacancy for City of Mississauga Ward 1 to be dealt with under other business, item 16.2, and further that the agenda for February 22nd be approved as amended. Councillor Medeiros, I have you on the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to add an in-camera discussion regarding an update on the bargaining with long-term workers, and I've given the heads up to staff.
Okay, that would be an in-camera item 19.4. Okay. Seeing no other recommended changes, someone like to move approval of the agenda? Councillor Starr, Mayor Thompson, all those in favor? That's carried. We have no items under item 5. We have 2 delegations. The first delegation is 6.1, Jim Fraught, Communications Director, Tom O'Callahan, Deputy Project Director and Commercial Manager, Ader Arbesu, Design Build Director, and Vicente Valencia, Chief Executive Officer of Link 427, are here to do a presentation. I hope we have enough. Are all of you coming forward?
No, just me.
Who's the just me? Are you Jim?
I'm Jim Fott, and I'll
Okay.
introduce the others. Yes.
Welcome. Are you likely to need more than 5 minutes today?
I won't need more than 5 minutes. I
You
will
won't?
not need more than 5 minutes.
Oh, good, great. Thank you.
I'll stick to my 5 minutes.
Welcome.
So thank you for allowing us to present to you this important project, infrastructure project. Although it's not in your region, it is in next to your region, very close to your region, and there's a lot of traffic impacts for your region. And we'll talk about the fact that we are talking to both Peel Regional staff and Brampton staff and Caledon staff about making sure that we communicate properly. So to start off with, do I advance this myself? I just want to talk about who is Link 427. You've always heard of the public-private partnerships and the corporations that are formed, but this company has been formed for this project to build the expansion of the 427. And I'll talk about what that is. There's 2 parts to that. I want to highlight the communications activities. That's most important for Peel Region. And then there's opportunity for questions and comments. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce, so you can see who they are. The CEO of Link 427 is Vicente Valencia. Aitor Abreu is the Design Build Director. And Tom O'Callahan is the Deputy Project Director and Commercial Manager. So those are the principals. So now you've seen their faces. You can chase them down if you need to. The developer is ACS Infrastructure Canada and Miller Link 427 Partners, Inc. The construction group is Dragados Canada and Miller and Bott Infrastructure, and design is WSP Group. So you can see that there's an international consortium building this with local flavor with Miller and Bott. So these P3 infrastructure projects are largely turning out this way as we move forward in Ontario with Infrastructure Ontario doing the alternative finance protocol. So we are to design, build, finance, and maintain for 30 years once constructed this piece of highway. The equity members are ACS Infrastructure and Brennan Infrastructure, which is the part of Miller Construction and what Miller Group, but it's Brennan Construction is the infrastructure side. The contractors are Dragados, Brennan, and Bott. And the contractor, the main contractors for the design portion of it is WSP and Black & McDonald, which you may know from other projects is the main project group doing the electrical and some of the utility work. Design subconsultant is Thurber. So what is this project? This project is a $616 million fixed price contract with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure Ontario to design, build, finance, and maintain this piece of the highway. The contract includes a 30-year period starting with the opening of the highway, and I'll get to that in a second. And Link 427 will be responsible for the ongoing maintenance of that highway. Construction is expected to start in spring of 2018. I'm glad to say that the shovels will go in the ground tomorrow. So we're starting grubbing tomorrow, and happy day for us because we've been working almost very diligently for many months on the final design and approvals and making sure that we get everything right. And the project is expected to conclude in 2021. So what is this piece of highway? There's two parts. There's an extension from Highway 7 north to Major Mackenzie, 8 lanes to Rutherford, 6 lanes from Rutherford to Major Mackenzie, and 3 new interchanges, and managed lanes at the median on this highway. So there will be managed lanes constructed on this. The 4-kilometer widening section will be from Finch Avenue to Highway 7, 6 to 8 lanes, and 4 to 8 lanes south of Steeles to Highway 7. New managed lanes at the median there as well. So you can see that there's a lot of lanes heading north, and they're going to terminate at this point at Major Mackenzie, and that's our job to construct it to Major Mackenzie. That's the project there. The solid line is the widening, and the dotted line is the new construction, the new extension. So there's widening and extension all under the banner of expansion, 427 expansion. The map on the right is the lands that we've been transferred from the Government of Ontario to Link 427 to construct this highway. So those are the lands that we have to work within to build this highway. So that's our project area. We have a project website that is certainly up and running, and you can link to that anytime. The central portal for communications on this project will be through the website. We do, as most projects now, have a one window of communication, so there's one telephone line for English, one for French, because we do have Toronto within our boundaries, so we do have to do everything bilingually. So we have a French website and an English website. And one email, which is ask@427expansion.ca. So all questions and inquiries will funnel through that, and we'll make sure you get responses. We have a complaint protocol that's posted online that says we will do our best to answer those questions as quickly as possible. At least getting you an interim response and letting you know that we're working on a response. As with all these highways, you always see these variable message panels, and we've been working with your staff and York Region staff to make sure that the messages on them and the timing, as well as how long it's going to take to get from point A to point B, will be part of the portable message signs. There'll be 3 key locations, so we're just getting those final locations approved and whatever permits required to make sure that they're in the right locations. And if you find in your ward or whatever it's not in the right location, let us know. We're certainly happy to talk about if that's not working for you. We want to make sure that works. Notices and bulletins will be coming out. We have a bulletin coming out next week, and we also have an opportunity for other communications products that go out within a 2-kilometer radius. So all notices on this project go out with a 2-kilometer radius, so that does extend into Peel Region. I made my time. Questions and comments? Anybody?
Great, thank you. I have Mayor Thompson on the board.
Well, thank you very much for your delegation, and I'm going to tell you as the mayor to the just north of this,
Yes.
you're 10 years too late. I guess my first question, well, you know, there's one thing I do know, provincial highways have to start and finish on one, so when you come to Major Mac's not a provincial highway, so I'm optimistic we're going to get to Highway 9, so I have to be on record to say that. Because that's a real challenge for all of us, and I know in our community of Bolton, if you want to talk about it, is people are drowning in traffic, they just cannot get to work. So it's how we get there from now till 2021 to get this open. This is my other question, is looking at the capacity and the need and already seeing the infrastructure being heavily built. And I know you're the builders, you're not the design engineers, and I get that. I want to ask why you're not building 8 lanes to Major Mac, because I think you're going to need every lane. I think you're going to find this road is going to be at full capacity by the time it comes on stream. That's why I'm saying it's 10 years too late. And I guess that's some of the questions. Has it been designed and engineered to expand as needed, or are we going to have to wait in time for that again?
Well, so as you may not know, the first environmental assessment was completed in 2010. There's been 2 environmental assessments since then to expand the lanes. So there is going to be a portion of this highway that's going to be allowed for a future transitway, and the right-of-way will, I think, as required, will be allowed to expand. Yes, there has been 2 expansions already since the first environmental assessment to what we're constructing today. So.
I can tell you, as mayor of Caledon, that this is just one thing that, I'm glad it's here, I'm glad you're here. I just wish you were here 10 years ago talking about this.
We do too.
Because this is a real challenge. And I know a lot of people are mad at the, the industry and the trucks, but they're just trying to do what they're trying to do. It's just we do not have enough infrastructure to handle the growth that the province is asking us to build at. So I know this is going to be more challenging as we go forward, but thank you very much. I really appreciate the delegation and the timeliness of the project. Thank you for coming and being here today.
Mayor Thompson, would you like to bring forward 10.1 at this time?
Absolutely.
Great. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation, and yeah, better late than never, they say. A question for you, when you say expand, and there's room to expand, are you expanding this way, or are you expanding that way?
Our terminus in our contract is to construct a highway to Major Mac. North of that, you need to talk to the government of Ontario about what their plans are north of that.
Right.
So
So I'm not going to shoot you as the messenger, because you're only the messenger, and I'm certainly not mad at the trucking industry. I'm mad at the powers to be, because the powers to be needed to take this to at least Highway 9. And Mayor Tom, I represent Bolton, and I will tell you, all the trucks come through there, it comes through our villages. So I'm not going to shoot you because you're only the messenger. But I certainly, and I know this council and the chairman has sent a letter to the province to talk about future expansion to go north. Not expansion this way. This way helps, but not that much. So thank you for your presentation, and I will continue to knock on the doors on the powers to be at the province to say we really need it to go to Highway 9. I wouldn't mind a copy of your presentation, or is it on your website?
it's not on our website. Is the region able to provide it? Yes.
Okay.
We've provided the copy to the region, yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Palashi.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for your delegation. What I didn't hear in the delegation was, with all of the expansions, what are we doing for sustainable transportation? What are we doing? Is there HOV lanes? Are there direct commercial lanes? All I'm hearing is kind of the widening and the paving paradise to put up a freeway, I guess.
So there's two ways to answer that. We are building for managed lanes at the median. So the managed lanes are lanes that will have rules for general purpose for HOV, HOT. So that's for the government to decide when to implement. We're putting the conduit, the footings, all that in for the HOV lanes.
But
And
there's
as
no
well-
mention of actually, kicking it off with the HOV lanes?
No,
It's
that
something
that
in
would
the
be a
future?
separate contract from the MTO to put the HOV.
And you have not heard of, I know,
Yeah.
and I ask you these questions because they're not here delegating to
Yeah.
us, so.
So that's a separate contract with MTO and IO to provide the infrastructure for that. We're doing the base, the lanes, and the conduit footings. There is a transitway protected corridor in this as well, so there is a sustainability aspect to that there is a transitway corridor protected. And with Finch West going across just at the south end of this project, who knows?
Okay, so there's still,
Finch West LRT is going to be crossing the south end of this project, so over to Humber College, so.
right, okay, thank you.
Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Chair. Thank you, Jim, for the presentation. I want to say I'm grateful that it's finally happening.
Me too.
And certainly it's really needed, especially as Brampton is just growing and growing on the east side. It'll be a great service for the people there. Just a question, the exchange, will there be a full exchange at Major Mac and Huntington and where the 427 meet up? Is that a full exchange?
There's a full exchange there, that's right, but Huntington will close because of that exchange. So Huntington South will close at that interchange. Probably sometime later this year. We're doing preloading on that area this year. So once the Bell finishes their infrastructure move that's in that area, then that preloading will continue across Huntington. Huntington will be a cul-de-sac on the north and south of Major Mac.
Yeah, actually, I just drove there on the weekend. There's a new Huntington I saw, so
Yeah.
that's going to replace the old Huntington.
Yeah,
is
that's
it?
right.
Yeah, well, it's good to see you. And anyway, thank you very much, and everybody's looking forward to this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mayor Thompson.
Yes, and I thank the acting chair to remind me of this, and I guess this was in the actual report, but you're the right person to ask. Kiss and ride. Is there going to be, have you planned to have places where people can pull off and park? And this stretch of road that you're building?
I'm going to defer to the CEO. I don't believe we do. There's no kiss and rides on this portion planned at this point. Our construction
Wow.
does not include that.
That's unfortunate, because I know we're trying to get people off the road, and those are the right places to have the collector.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a need at probably a couple spots there for a kiss and ride.
That's disappointing that they didn't include that from the EA. That's too bad.
If I can, is it too late to
It's never
add
too late to
that
make
before
the
the
suggestion to the
conclusion of
Minister
the
of
project?
Transportation, because it's their infrastructure, so it's never too late to make the suggestion.
I'm actually wondering, I know this isn't our municipality, but I'm wondering if this is something that we can send a letter from the regional chair to the project to ask about parking for the kiss and ride programs, because this is something that we've been emphasizing extremely in our transit studies, and I'm just wondering if this is something that we could send forward from the regional council.
As a formal request?
Yes.
Does that require a motion, Madam Clerk? Direction? Okay.
You can do it as a direction.
So Councillor Thompson is moving receipt of the report, receipt of the delegation, and direction to staff to have the chair author a letter requesting kiss and rides, at the very least at the terminus, and appropriate spots along the way. That's seconded by Councillor Shaughnessy. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
You're leaving with a to-do list. Our next delegation today is 6.2, Amarjot Singh, Senior Engineer, Water and Climate Change Science, Credit Valley Conservation Authority. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair, for having me here to present on this topic, road salt implication, how they're impacting our water bodies. And I wanted to acknowledge one of my staff, Lorna Muniston is here with me. She helped me put this presentation together. So before I show some numbers from some of our urban creeks, I just wanted to give a perspective of what these numbers mean. And this is for chloride. Chloride is a major component in the road salt, which is sodium chloride. And chloride is iron, which is very conservative. It doesn't get used or consumed, or so it walks with the water as it flows. So if you open your tap and send the sample for analysis, what you will see is the chloride concentration would be around 10 milligrams per liter. And if it exceeds 250 milligrams per liter, then that's where our drinking water standard kicks in, and it's considered unfit for drinking. For our creeks, the pristine creeks, the levels are usually under 30 milligrams per liter. And if these levels increase to 120 milligrams per liter, then they are considered not healthy for some of the sensitive species. However, the acute ones, which is like 24 to 48 hours, if those levels are higher than 640 milligrams per liter, that means that could kill some of the sensitive aquatic species, depending upon where we are. And just to give you a context, like sea level or ocean level chloride concentrations are around 20,000 milligrams per liter. So what's happening to our urban creeks with perspective of chloride concentration? So we have a good network of provincial water quality monitoring stations in our watershed where we have been monitoring chloride for long term. And this is a trend which you are seeing. As early as 70s, we are seeing that we already exceeded the chronic guidelines, so which is not good. But later in this millennium, we have seen that we are consistently exceeding the acute guidelines. So that means we are losing some of the species in this area. But how this station works is we'll go out once a month, take a sample, send it to the lab. So we don't know what's happening in between. And thanks very, very much to Region of Peel for providing funding for the real-time water quality stations where we monitor chloride concentrations every 15 minutes around the year, and we know when the melt is happening and how the concentrations are. And that's where you see the spikes. The spikes are going above the sea chloride level. So that is something which is alarming and which we should be concerned about. Why it's happening? How much it's happening? It's because our urban areas, the way they are designed, they need to discharge water as quickly as possible, and as they discharge, they also take all the pollutants with them, and that's where you see the spike. The moment snow melts on the road and it enters through the storm network to our creeks, you see a big spike, and that's what's happening in our creeks like Cooksville Creek and Sheridan Creek, where the exceedances are close to sea level. And what happens during ambient period like summer and fall period, because there is now buildup of salt in our soil layers and in groundwater, you still see very high levels, which is again are very concerning. So implications, if I call, implications are on the sensitive species, and we don't want to lose them, and we need to learn lesson from our older developments at how we can forego those mistakes. Infrastructure is an issue. Chlorophylla or algae, this is how that may be impacting, and this is concern. And this picture, it won't be in your printouts, but the way it is, like when we have chloride or salt in our water, the water becomes heavy, and it goes to the bed of the river, bed of the lake, and that's where our intakes are, and that's where Chlorophylla or algae grows, and it chokes our pipes. And it also, we want to protect our headwaters like Caledon and other areas. We also want to protect our source areas, groundwater areas for drinking, and also we want to protect agricultural areas so that they are not impacted. So what do we need to do here? The first thing we need to change is public expectations. That's what we expect when we go to the parking lot or road, that this much amount of salt or this much level of service should be there. And if we don't see that, then that's what happens, and that's when the liability issues come. So the options to explore are phenomenal. Region is doing their salt management plans, and so are the municipalities. But what's happening to the private sector, to the parking lots, where about 13 times of salt is spread to meet the expectations of public. So that's where the focus should be with the stormwater rates coming in, and that's where the opportunity to redesign and refocus on our parking lot needs to be done, along with coordinating with Smart About Salt-like organization to improve efficiencies in salt application. Thank you so much. That's what I wanted to bring today.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a number of speakers. Councillor Ionica.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Manjit and Lorna, first of all, thank you for an excellent report. Some councillors will recall, Councillor Carolyn Parrish and I brought this up at the last council meeting, and I saw it was based on a report that was done on the CBC, and I saw it in real time. So I'm so glad that it's here, and as soon as I saw the report, I called out to the CVC and said, we need a report on this to the CVC, and when we got it at our last meeting, I said, it really is something that you have to bring to regional council, and I've asked for it to come to Mississauga Council, and I think my colleagues in Brampton and Caledon might like to do the same, and I'm sure our staff at the CVC would like to do that. Public service announcement first on behalf of the CVC. I remind you, this is the monitoring equipment that for years we had to fight to get from you, and I'm so proud you funded it, because the first thing we learned, for example, is that my Cooksville Creek goes from 4 to 6 inches to 6 to 8 feet in 6 to 8 minutes. Without the monitoring equipment, you wouldn't know that. So I'm glad you gave us the monitoring equipment finally after many years of asking for it, because it's the same monitoring equipment that gives you this data. Which brings me to my next point. We as the CVC are your canary in the coal mine here. We're just telling you what's out there. We didn't put the salt there. We did. I'm including myself in both. So this is really a clarion call from us from the CVC to tell you we have a problem here. There's no question about it, especially as it relates to the species that are coming back to our water streams that we've worked so hard to get back in our streams that we're now potentially going to kill ourselves with our own salt. That's absolutely unacceptable. So going forward, I think the message is
There are a lot of other technologies that are available to deal with winter maintenance, salt, ice, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of other jurisdictions use them. We're not in the business of the CVC to do that. We are here as we look after the roads locally and regionally. So I would hope, and this is what we're doing in Mississauga, that this information go back to our hamlets, and ours will, and then it will lead to a follow-up report, in our case from Mississauga, the Region Appeal, et cetera, that our transportation and work staff come back and say, yep, we hear you, we understand there's a problem. What are we going to do going forward to make sure that we aren't putting so much salt and contaminants on our streets that's ending up poisoning our water supply in terms of the species and other species? And it's not just the fish. This thing has a lasting impact that goes forward for many, many, many years. So we need to find a better way. And I never thought I'd be able to tell this story, but I will. If you know your history, it's what the Romans did to Carthage when they went and pounded salt into their wounds and into their land 1,000 years ago, and you still can't grow stuff in modern-day Carthage. So we need to find a much better way. It exists. I think it's going to take some money. Years ago, I compared our system to the Montreal system, where my wife's family's from. They don't spend as much salt, and they don't deal with snow the same way. They pick it up and move it. But then I found out we were spending about 17 million in Mississauga back then. Montreal was spending 54 million. You don't have to salt it if you move it. And they bring out the dump trucks and they lift the salt with the backhoes and they go store it where it doesn't bother anybody, and then it slowly melts into the St. Lawrence. I'm not saying we should be doing that. We need to do something. So with thanks to my colleagues at the CVC for having monitored it and brought this to our attention, it's our job now to do something about this. So my recommendation is one of receipt, referral to the appropriate local agencies in the region to say, come back with a solution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So you're referring this back to staff to report?
At the regional level, for the
appropriate
regional
time.
roads, of course, and for, it's also coming back to us in Mississauga. I'm sure my colleagues in Brampton and Caledon may have similar thoughts, but I will leave it to them
Great.
in their jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sprovieri? So
thank
I'll ask you to perhaps ask your questions and signal your intent to support a referral.
Certainly. And I would second the motion.
Great, thank you.
I just want to thank Amjad for the presentation. Thank you very much, and for bringing this to our attention. We've known this for a long time, that salt is a huge problem. We, as councillors, also are faced with public demand. As you pointed out, the public demands safe roads, and we hear that all the time. In Brampton, we use a combination of sand and salt in our secondary roads, salt in our primary roads. I don't know if other Mississauga or Caledon is doing the same, or Toronto. I don't know what they're doing. Perhaps if they're making a mix, or whether they're just using salt, straight salt. Would you know what other municipalities are doing around the GTA?
Well, there are a number of options. One is like straightaway rock salt, or rather is treated salt. It may be treated with magnesium chloride, or it may be treated with beet juice. There are some other alternatives also available, and people have piloted some studies. CVC did one pilot study with the city of Mississauga to see what the ratio of different components would be, and what would be more practical to use. So there are material out there, but we assist in different studies, but we don't know exactly which municipality is using what.
And I believe it's time that we have to really seriously look at this, because as the region grows, as the GTA grows, the problem is going to be becoming worse and more complex. And so I do agree we need a solution, and I'm happy to second the motion to direct staff to come back with some options. And maybe there are some reasonable options, other reasonable options where the public will pay the bill, because obviously any other option is probably more expensive than what we're doing today. Otherwise, I'm sure staff would have brought us other ideas by now. But it's always a monetary problem that we're faced, as you know. So thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Chair, for that.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanjot, thank you for the presentation. I think it was the last time we spoke about this, our friend, the U.S. Consul General, Juan Elsassi, he's an advocate for removing salt off the roads. He's a big environmentalist, and I think he's got some best practices learned in the U.S. that we can adapt or modify for our use. It's always a pressure on us to balance the safety of our residents, the safety of the roads with those environmental concerns. But I think going forward, we really need, even if it's a greater investment, need to look at alternatives. I know you've raised beet juice a few times. I don't know how practical that is, or earth or dirt, but there must be other alternatives they're using throughout North America. But you know, we have to find a way to eliminate use of salt because it's overuse now, particularly with the harsh winter we've had. I'm sure there's you know, much more than in typical years out of salt that we've used this year. So I can only imagine the impact that'll have on our rivers, lakes, and streams. So do you know from the United States or from elsewhere what other
Well, there are
sources there
options,
could
like,
be?
say, for example, in Quebec, it's
Oh,
mandatory to have.
they've had harsh weather conditions
yeah,
as well.
it's mandatory to have snow tires, right? So we don't
Correct.
have it mandatory in Ontario. If you go to Scandinavian countries, it's even on top of that, they have studded tires, right? So they don't apply straight away salt, because salt doesn't work if the temperature is below 10 degrees Celsius, right? So there are alternatives available. It's just, you know, how we want to take action. And also, it's not only municipalities the way they are, but also the private sector, which is totally missed. And some of the private parking lots, they are paid by the amount of salt a contractor is spreading. So if I'm a contractor, I may be inclined to put more
of
salt to that,
course.
or even to, you know, to increase safety. So those are the things which need to be considered along, I mean, holistically. It's not only one piece of the puzzle, but there are multiple pieces which we need to.
I know in
look into.
British Columbia, the trucks are required to put chains on their tires
right.
when they're driving
Yep.
as well. So yeah, I
So
know
there
you're
are
going to look
solutions
into it. so-
available. That's where, like, you know, we have increased expectations of public. So we expect that after a snowy event, you know, maybe.
Do you have any idea how much more salt was used this year than in an average or typical year?
I don't have those numbers. Municipalities would have.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Amanjit, for coming. A few questions on the options to explore. I don't know if you can go back to that slide. When it comes to the operator certification for the private parking lots, do you know if there's anybody at the city, region, or CBC doing any proactive communications with those landholders in terms of minimizing salt use?
Yeah, so CVC, TRC, and Lake Simcoe, we have come together under the broader STEP program, and we are collaborating with the Smart About Salt. This is a region of Waterloo's associated organization, which provides certification to private contractors. And we have developed some modules which now Smart About Salt is taking to provide training and certifications. That's already available. But you know, more communication needs to be done towards the landowners so that they ensure that when they are hiring Smart About Salt trained contractors, so that, you know, they know what to do, how to calibrate the equipment, and how much to spread. Yes.
And I think in the general conscience, there does seem to be a perception that there's more and more salt being used on the roadways and on those private parking lots. So I think that public awareness it will certainly help put pressure on those organizations to reduce the use. And in terms of sand use, that doesn't melt the ice. That just provides better traction, which I guess is one of our issues. But sand is also detrimental to our waterways as well.
That's right.
So it's
So there are
kind of a
combination
conundrum.
of sand, like some municipalities use the sand and salt mix, which again has a huge amount of salt in it. And some where the temperatures go even below 10 degrees Celsius, so it's just for traction. But again, too much application of that is also, that chokes the storm sewers, that chokes also the creeks, and also is harmful for aquatic life.
When it comes to parking lot redesign, are you doing any work with the City of Mississauga Stormwater Group so that when those parking lots get redesigned and there's a stormwater catchment system, they can also deal with the salt issues?
Yeah, so I don't have a straightway answer for you, but the way stormwater rates are designed, 5% credit goes to any private organization if they design it properly for snow, where to dump the snow or where the location of the catch basin would be. So that's already there.
But do they take special steps to deal with the, I guess, catchment of salt, rather than just the stormwater runoff?
Well, I'm not 100% sure whether the salt in it, yeah, you're right, it is there. Like, they have to provide a salt management plan for their property to get that credit.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
And this is under pollution and prevention.
Okay. For the mandatory snow or stud tires, that's typically a provincial
right.
responsibility? Because it's
Well,
pretty hard to enforce municipally or regionally.
It's being done in Quebec, that's what I know. Here, it was initiated, insurance companies do get a little bit, not very much discount if you have snow tires on your thing, but there is no provincial regulation on that.
Do you think there should be?
Pardon me?
Do you think there should be?
Sorry.
Do you think there should be provincial?
There should be,
regula-
yes.
Okay.
That's, if you want to enforce something, there needs to be, yes.
Maybe we can take that up at our next CVC board meeting in terms of communicating that with the province. And last but not least, in terms of exploring some of the state-of-the-art technologies, what do you recommend? And is this related specifically to the snow plows themselves, or what state-of-the-art technologies were you referencing?
Technology is improving day by day, like the GPS controlled, or the main thing which the equipment needs is the calibration. So when it stops at an intersection, it should not still be spinning and throwing out salt. So that technology is there. Some municipalities have already adapted those, techniques and retrofitted their equipment. But it's improving day by day. The plowing is improving, the way the plows are designed and all the stuff. So it's already there. Some municipalities have started to take it, but again, coming from municipalities and from private sector is still very weak on the parking lots. That's where the focus should be, simultaneously. Because Environment and Climate Change Canada has code of practices for municipalities, and most of the municipalities, I know, though it's a volunteer program, they have their salt management plans in place, but there's nothing for private parking lots.
And it was a little disconcerting to see the results for Sheridan Creek, which runs through partially Ward 2 in Mississauga. But is there anything that we can do specifically with that creek or those creek banks to manage the salt runoff?
Well, once the salt is there in the soil layer, it takes quite a bit of time for it to flush, right? So that's why I brought two things, like the peak concentrations, that's all related to how much salt we spread, because if we control that, then peak we can control. So it won't reach ocean level concentrations. But for the chronic level, it's going to take time as it has already reached in the groundwater, the shallow groundwater, which feeds the creeks. So that will be a slow process. But the only remedy is to cut down on salt application.
Okay, thank you very much. Good presentation.
Thank you. Councillor Innes.
Thank you for your presentation. As mentioned already before, with the legislation changing in provinces like Quebec, it is something that we have to look at provincially because we are mandated through them, especially in our urban areas. And so I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to take this presentation and refer it back to staff so that they can bring a fulsome report, not only what we can do and ask of the province, but we know that sometimes the province isn't going to make those changes. So what we can legislate as a regional government to minimize the salt use, like we've done with using compressed natural gases, we've taken that environmental role, balancing the cost with the environmental cause. So I would ask if staff could maybe bring that back, and I don't know if that requires a motion or just direction.
Councillor Ionica has moved that
Yeah.
recommendation.
And that would be great, because I think that, I know, we've talked to our own staff in Caledon with regards to using beet juice, and there's a temperature issue and there's an equipment issue. So even though these new technologies are coming forward, they don't actually suit the needs of the varying parts of the region. So if we can have a fulsome discussion and encourage regional staff to actually reach out to the area municipalities as well and their public works departments to talk about what is working and what isn't working in those areas, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson.
Yes, I'm just going to follow up a little further with Councillor Innes. I think this is something that can be put back to the intergovernmental relations to the provincial level. Because here's the challenges that we do have here that's a little different than Quebec. We have joint sever liability that's really hurting us badly, especially it needs to go to the Attorney General, because the challenge is it's like the Wild West right now with people with slips and falls in parking lots. And you talk to the mall operators just across the way here. They're just trying to protect themselves from constant litigation against them. And it has to be brought into order. Turn on the TV, and if you've had a slip or fall, call me here. I will, I don't get paid till you get paid kind of thing. And what a lot of the times is just pay the person 10 grand or whatever, because it's not worth going to court. So I think we have to somehow, it's a knee-jerk reaction, but it creates a reaction that just keeps compounding. I'll use an example from another perspective. We have a lot of ash trees. We got a lot of chip piles. So we're putting wood chips down, and we're doing it in Albion as well as in Ward 1 on the gravel roads to see what it does. But, as you plow that off into the ditches, what's the impact that those wood chips create after we've used our winter runoff? Even in asphalt areas or in urban areas, what's the cleanup? What do we do with the cleanup? Once you got contamination, you can't use those for other things. So even though we're looking at something experimenting, we got to look at what the actual outcome is at the end. We think we're doing a great thing but we figure solves the problem. It's reducing liability and everything, but now we're looking at what the impacts are creating to our fish and streams. So even though we're using new products, we got to figure out the study what that's going to be. Having said that, I think we're trying a lot of this, but I think we really need to have the province at the table to understand, and it's got to come down. It's got to come through the private landowners, but they're trying to protect themselves. Somehow we've got to get it at the top. We've got to stop the craziness happening in court that's tying up our court times. So I think it's great bringing this education here, but I think this isn't the only place. We need to shove it upstairs where the decisions are made that control the laws so that we can bring. This is the environmental impact that you're having because you're not dealing with the actual issue. So I think to follow up where Councillor Innes and what Councillor Nika were saying, I really definitely think we need to somehow bring the province into a perspective. And this is something to educate the public. Let the public ask the people knocking on the door for a provincial election, what are you doing about this? Let's start to hold them accountable. Like even the last election drove the cost of car insurance. The only reason why it's being dealt with is because that was the number one question was being asked at the door. So I think this is just another way to feed the public to say, hey, we got an environmental concern, so you need to ask your future MPP, what are you going to do for us? So thank you so much. Your report is really timely, but I think this is where we need to push it out and make it happen. So thank you for your delegation.
Okay, just for clarification, Mayor Thompson, the referral back to staff by Councillor Anika will come back to this council. Can I suggest at that point of time might be the appropriate time to refer it to government
Probably,
relations rather
yeah.
than have it report back?
Yeah,
in
I
both
think
places?
that's probably one we have something tangible to work with. Makes a lot
Okay.
of sense. That's
Thank
true.
you. Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming in and delegating. I believe that at CVC, we asked for the delegations to come to both Brampton and Mississauga, as well as Caledon. So we look forward to seeing you again at the municipality. Speaking to the referral, I wonder if staff can take into account, what our ability here is to administer any sanctions and change of bylaws or implement a bylaw to limit the amount of salt that is being used in the private sector. I realize that some of the comments are, in terms of slip and fall. If I go to the mall and I slip and fall on ice, my first thought in my head is, oh, I'm going to sue these people. Like, it's a little bit ridiculous, and I think they need to be at the table here with us, because really, it's a their problem, not an our problem. With the amount, when you go to a mall and you look at the parking lot and you see it's completely white, and there's not a snowflake on the ground, that's ridiculous and insane. So I think, the private sector needs to be at the table with us in some capacity to put this on them. We need to, I think, put sanctions on the amount of salt that they use, because what they use is completely overkill, and they need to find out a strategy in terms of keeping their customers safe when they're on their property. So I would just like the staff to take that into account and see what we can do, and I look forward to seeing it at the City of Brampton. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Sato.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I think this is something that cities have been grappling with for many, many years, and we constantly ask our staff in the city to, why can't you use this? Because residents will send us information, the beet juice, for example. And we have had a report from our staff in Mississauga as to what it does to the equipment, getting it on the trucks, and all of the other reasons why not. We do use the magnesium chloride, the treated salt, on sidewalks and bus stops, but that costs 5 times what the road salt does, of course. I agree that, when you talked about the province of Quebec mandating snow tires, it's interesting because I was just looking at some statistics, and Montreal uses the same amount of salt as the city of Toronto does. And last year, they used 130,000 tons of salt on the streets in Montreal. So mandating snow tires might not be the solution that we think it could be. If there's no reduction in the amount of salt in the city, and obviously if you compare the two cities, it's probably very similar to what they would use even if you didn't have mandated snow tires. I was rather surprised at that because I would have thought that there would have been a greater reduction. Have you looked at that at all? I know you've looked at Quebec, but the numbers don't seem to bear out the.
I don't have exact answer for you on that, because there are climatic factors which play into a role for when and where the salt is applied, and I'm pretty sure that Montreal gets much more snow than we get in Toronto. But the thing is, it's not only that aspect. The thing is, it's when it comes to safety, definitely we'll also need to look at how many insurance claims that come out of Montreal, because they are using, and traction is phenomenal when you use snow tires. So that is, again, and it's also public perception that when you see that people are switching to snow tire, they're being more cautious in their driving habits. They don't take it for granted that the things would be all clear, but they take onus of that thing. So these things help, along with other things like how much salt efficient application of salt could be there.
So we use brine. The region uses brine. We pre-treat. So does the city of Mississauga, and I assume Brampton does as well, which is a diluted salt. Does that have? I mean, is it still the same impact? You're still using salt. You're
That's
still
right.
using calcium chloride, but you're diluting it.
That's right. So it has a different, means you won't always use brine or pre-wet it, but it's a condition that for those say for example ramps and some of the heavy use stretches of roads where if you apply that before, then it doesn't let the ice to form,
Right.
and
Right.
that's where it helps.
Yeah. I guess I'm just wondering.
But it has the same
using
impact.
that, does it have, if you're using a ton of brine, is that half the impact of a ton of salt, for example, on a roadway? I mean, you may not have that answer, I don't know, but.
I don't have exact answer, but what I have heard is if pre-wetting is done, then municipalities have experienced less use of salt overall.
Afterwards,
But I
yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
exact answer
May-
on that
Maybe,
one.
Madam Chair, we could ask staff that when the report comes back, if they could look at that and just let us know that by using brine, are we actually able to reduce the amount of salt? That's always been my understanding. And because the brine is diluted, what actually is the difference in, than if we weren't using it and using salt? And you've heard, you know, it's the issue of safety. And I really wish everybody around me had the same snow tires on their cars as I do. But, you know, when you sit at, I've sat, I would never go without snow tires, and I get a break in my car insurance from having snow tires on from, I guess it's December to March. I get a discount, not a lot, but I get a discount, which is a nice little perk. But I was sitting at an intersection, and I was looking around, and I was counting the number of cars that had snow tires. And I think it was maybe 2 out of every 20 cars had snow tires on, and the others had their regular things. I think part of the problem is people are buying all-season tires and thinking that they're great for snow and ice. And nothing's good on ice. I mean, it doesn't matter, my snow tires aren't good on ice. Blizzaks, that's all. It's the only thing that works on ice. But I think there is that perception that all-season tires, because they've been sold as that.
But I can give you one example. Like I live on a street in Guelph where it's about a kilometer stretch. It's a crescent, and it never gets salt application at all. And I've never seen any accident on that, because we all know that means that that's what we are expecting the services to be. So we adjust our speed. We do other things, and none of our neighbors, spread salt on their driveways. They always shovel, help each other. So that's the kind of thing, again, to create awareness that it snows in Canada, and we have
Yeah.
to.
It's an expectation of service.
Exactly.
And I went to university in Waterloo, and they never plowed. My daughter went to college in Barrie, and the streets weren't plowed, and they had a lot more snow than we did. Milton has a lower level of service. I go to visit my kids there, and their streets are not plowed. Mine will be bare, and their streets will still have snow on it, and you drive slower. It forces you to slow down. But I have to say I'm not proposing that we stop plowing our streets, because there is we've been giving that level of service, and there's that level of expectation that immediately after a snowstorm, or even during a snowstorm, that every street will be totally plowed and bare. And it's very high level of expectation, and the demands are continuing to come in. And we only get a very few people who look at the environmental side of things. The others want salt. I do get complaints about salt on sidewalks, and that's mostly from people trying to walk their pets along the sidewalk. And if you don't salt it, you get the complaints from the people who are trying to just walk on the sidewalk. So thank you. It's very, very timely, and hopefully we won't be using any more salt this year. I think we blew our budget. We used double in both the city and the region this year than what we did last year. So let's hope that that's the end of it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Iannick has moved receipt of the delegation and referral back to staff with some added comments from other members of council. All those in favor? It was seconded by Councillor Sprovieri. All in favor? That's carried. Well, then would you like to second it? Okay. And the vote carried twice. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Members of council will now move down to the consent agenda, and all items listed are in consent. Does anybody wish to add or remove anything from the consent agenda? Councillor Raz? You'd like to withdraw 8.2?
Yep.
Okay. So the chair of that committee, Councillor Fonseca, will make note of that. Seeing no other changes, would someone like to move consent agenda? Councillor, oh, we have two more. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, when we're doing consent agendas, the last couple of meetings, the staff run off and come back with a new agenda with the consent moved in. If we're pulling out one or two, can we not just scratch that off and save some paper?
We only provide that to the section chairs, not to the whole council, and it's to assist those that don't use the electronic, because those that are on the electronic, it's harder for them to scratch off, and we do promote
Yeah, I
using the
never thought about the
electronic
electronic.
system, so.
I tried the electronic, just didn't work for me. Okay. I hadn't thought about the electronic thing. Just use your imagination.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
I'd like to pull 10.3 and 10.5.
10.3 and 10.5 are not in consent?
Okay,
Okay.
I'm confused.
Only those listed on the agenda are in consent. Otherwise, the expectation is that they are open for discussion. Councillor Reyes.
1.
Okay, so 8.2 and 13.1 have been removed from consent. Councillor Reyes, would you like to move second consent agenda because Councillor Downey's moved it? All those in favor? No, we need a recorded vote on that. All those in favor, when the voting buttons are active? Do I get to vote?
No.
I don't get to vote.
Yes, you do. Yes.
Okay, good. Apparently I don't. That's okay. That carries.
Yes, we're going to fix that right now.
Okay. Well, I think it's only, if there was a contentious vote and I needed to vote, it would be a matter of concern. Thank you. Okay, we'll move down to items related to enterprise programs and services, and I'll turn the chair over to Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. Item 8.1 is the Peel Region's External Client Satisfaction Survey for 2017, and this is for information, but we do have a presentation. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of Regional Council. I am Charlotte Martin. I am the Director of Information Management, and with me today is Sandra Guyrie. Sandra is the Senior Vice President and Manager of Ipsos Public Affairs Division. We are pleased to present to you and discuss the results of the 2017 External Client Satisfaction Survey. The External Client Satisfaction Survey is a comprehensive look of how Peel residents perceive the delivery of services to the community. Just to provide you some background, this is the sixth wave of the survey that has been guided by the methodology first developed back in 2008. The region surveyed approximately 4,200 residents of Peel across all 3 municipalities and covered 20 services that are delivered to the community. This year, the region primarily worked with Ipsos to complete the research, and Sandra is here today to present high-level results from the survey and help answer any questions you may have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me here this morning. I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about the Client Satisfaction Index. What this is an index of all of the services that are provided by the region, and each of the services weighted by the budget that's allocated for that service. So, as you can imagine, services that receive higher budget allocation are weighted higher in the index, and services that receive lower budget allocation are weighted lower in the index. This year's overall satisfaction index is 7.7 out of 10, which we would consider a very good result. However, I would point out that this is down from 8.0 out of 10 from 2015. Before I go into the reasons why that number has declined, I want to talk about the index when we separate it when we separate out living services from thriving services. As you may recall, living services relate to primarily human services, EI, rent supplement, and so on, whereas thriving services relate more to public health services and public works services. What I'd like to point out is both scores are also relatively good and very similar at 7.8 for living services and 7.6 for thriving services. So the reason why the overall index of 7.7 is down from 8.0 from 2015 is primarily driven by the declines in two areas, both related to public works, one being road maintenance, the second one being curbside waste collection. On a positive note, we have seen a statistically significant uptake on satisfaction with community recycling centers, also within the public works portfolio. On all of the other thriving services, any differences we see do not meet the statistical threshold to be considered significant. Therefore, we would characterize them as unchanged. Going back to the living services, as you can see on the slide here, there are some changes year over year compared to 2015, but again, none of them meet the threshold to be considered statistically significant. Therefore, we would characterize them as unchanged. So now that we have a little bit of a lay of the land and how things have changed year over year, and in particular service areas, I want to talk a little bit about how we move forward. One of the ways we can move forward in improving satisfaction among residents is to look at what drives satisfaction so that we know when we're making changes to service delivery, we're making changes that are to the benefit of residents and will in fact improve satisfaction. So what we do is we do a series of driver analysis to figure out what correlates with overall satisfaction with a particular service. And then we look at, on top of that, the current satisfaction with each driver. So here on this slide, I'm walking you through some of the highlights of the work that we've done to identify first the drivers of client satisfaction. As you likely can appreciate, what drives someone to be satisfied with a service can vary depending upon the service itself. It can vary by the channel by which you access the service and the nature of the interaction. So in this slide, what we're separating out are what we call transactional services, which are essentially services that require limited interaction with the region and the region's staff, tend to be public works related, and we're separating that out from relational services, which, as you'll know, are more public health, and human services, where the interaction is a longer duration, may involve multiple touch points. For example, if you're administering EI or rent supplements or childcare fee subsidy, you might have several touch points during that experience. So we like to look at the driver analysis for those types of services separately. So within transactional services, we looked at the drivers of satisfaction when the resident attempts to complete their service interaction via the website. As I'm sure you can appreciate, more and more municipalities are looking to have residents activate through the website first. So this is an important area to look at. What we identified is the primary driver of satisfaction with a website experience is how easy it is to navigate the website. Related to that is, in fact, how quickly they can find what they're looking for in navigating the website. And the analysis found that satisfaction drops off significantly when it takes longer than 5 minutes to find what you're looking for on the website. So the expectation, therefore, would be about a 5-minute threshold. This is very similar to what we found with phone interaction as well. It's also a timeliness driver that's the most important and the most important for you to improve upon, and the expected wait time there is usually about 5 minutes. So in-person channels is slightly different. The drivers of satisfaction when you come in person to the region to do an interaction, it's less about wait time, and that's primarily because wait times are very good in person. Therefore, it doesn't differentiate someone from being satisfied or dissatisfied, because most people are satisfied with the wait time. What differentiates satisfaction in the in-person experience is the interaction itself with the staff member, whether the individual was able to resolve your problem, and whether you came away with the outcome you were hoping for. When it comes to relational services, we looked at telephone and in-home visits. So for some public health services, there are in-home visits as part of the service delivery. And what we found here is that the primary driver of satisfaction is the interaction with what we call the PEAL contact. So the PEAL contact is different from a general staff member. The PEAL contact is a very specific individual in the service experience. It could be a caseworker. It could be the public health nurse who visits and helps. So that particular individual for that type of service delivery is very indicative of whether the person will be satisfied in the end or not. And finally, the email channel, which we're trying to drive more residents presumably to, we find that the number one area of improvement there, which is related to the primary driver of satisfaction, which is the ease of which you get interaction with a staff member, and that essentially is how quickly you're able to get a reply to your email. To a certain extent, it's also about getting to the right person. So you may get a reply relatively quickly, but the reply simply was to say, you need to reach out to this other individual. So that was a high-level summary of some of the advice we would give that you consider in improving your service delivery by channel. And I just want to take a few more minutes to walk you through how we arrived at those conclusions. And what I'm showing on this particular slide is hopefully emphasizing that in our driver analysis, we did take quite a fulsome look at the different things that could influence client satisfaction. So for the website, we looked at, as we spoke about, timeliness, which is basically the quickness with which you could find what you were looking for, ease of navigation, the service outcome, did you get what you wanted, the usefulness of the information on the website, the degree to which you perceive the website to be confidential, and the visual appeal. And I will say the visual appeal is probably one of the areas where the region could improve. When it comes to telephone and in-person, also similar fulsomeness of things we looked at: timeliness, ease of access, service outcome, staff performance, service process, and problem resolution. And then relational services, the timeliness element there, which is an end-to-end time between applying for the service, receiving decision on your eligibility, and actually accessing the service to start. Those are related to human services, not public health services. And then the same inputs you saw for transactional services, and then the additional PEAL contact, which would be applicable to relational services, but not transactional services. So just to go one step further, to highlight, again, the key areas of improvement, you're looking at a slide here that's showing two very important pieces of information that I've alluded to already. The first one is in terms of the rows and the vertical positioning of what's in the top row versus what's towards the bottom rows. This is an indication of the strength of the attribute as a correlate to satisfaction. So the higher rows, the top rows, are stronger drivers of satisfaction, whereas the lower rows are less impactful. Not to say they're unimportant, but relatively less impactful on satisfaction. So that tells us one piece of information. The second piece of information is the current level by which residents are satisfied with each of those drivers. And we've identified with the red highlight those services where it is relatively important and yet satisfaction on that particular attribute is relatively low. Therefore, identifying it as a valuable place to spend some resource and time because it will help boost satisfaction. So again, that's speed of information on the website, the wait time for calling in, and when it comes to in-person, it's about being able to resolve the problem on the spot. I would also point out at the top of this slide is the current satisfaction by channel, and you can see that satisfaction when you go in person scores much higher from the resident's point of view, 8.4 out of 10, or sorry, 8.7 out of 10, versus calling in 7.5 out of 10 and visiting the website 7.7. So we've spoken a little bit about timeliness and how important that is in terms of activating on the website, but also calling in. And I want to take a moment to show you how we arrived at the suggestion that both should be around the 5-minute mark as your target. Current satisfaction with the wait time for finding information tends to be higher than in going in person at 8.6, lower for visiting the website and calling in 7.3 and 7.5 respectively. So we asked the survey respondents
this is a perception, it's not a reflection of what your actual times might show the call duration to be. We asked them, what do you perceive the amount of time was you were on the phone? 5.9 minutes was the average that we learned. And we asked them, well, how long did you expect it would take? The expectation averaged out. Some people were higher, some people were lower, but it averaged out at 3.8 minutes, roughly 4 minutes. So, okay, that gives us a bit of insight. So then we did a second step. We looked at organizing the people who are satisfied overall with that interaction from the people who are not satisfied overall with that interaction, and looked at the time, the perceived time that it took in aggregate for the two groups separately. So the people who were satisfied overall with their experience, they say took about 5.3 minutes. Those who were not satisfied or neutral, because there was a 5-point scale, so there was a neutral point in the middle, their average perceived time was 8.1 minutes. So we know 8 minutes clearly is impacting dissatisfaction. So this is helpful because we know we would love it to be 4, but I think it would be passable to be a 5-minute threshold for visiting the website. And calling in, we did the same work. You can see there the perceived time was 7.1. The expected time was under 5 at 4.5. The perceived time among people who were satisfied was nearly 6, and dissatisfied or neutral, the average wait time was about 11 minutes. Going in person, in fact, there is not a great deal of issue with time. It's meeting, largely it's meeting the needs of residents. Oh, I went to end. Oops, sorry. Just to keep you for a few more minutes, I want to walk through relational services. So here, the additional item you're seeing in addition to a channel analysis is we did look at home visit, which is primarily the Healthy Baby, Healthy Children program when we talk about in-home visit. So again, we did the same analysis. You can see the satisfaction scores across the top, 8.4 for calling in, 8.7 for going in person, 8.3 for emailing, and 8.9 for in-home visit. In-home visit, obviously, quite a bit higher there. And then we did the correlations to see what's driving satisfaction within those channels, and then use the red highlighting to identify things that are relatively important, but current levels of satisfaction for that item are particularly low. So that suggests that would be a good place to spend your energy. So for calling in for relational services, it's the ease of accessing staff. That can relate to wait time for getting someone on the phone. Going in person for health and human services, it's the end-to-end time from application to receiving the service, and I will point out that that's specific to human services, not public health services. Email, it's ease of access, which we spoke about, is about getting a reply to the email primarily. And in-home visit, it's actually about consistency of information. So as you can imagine, as a new mom, there might be multiple touch points along the way in the process, and the consistency by which you get the same information from different people at different times, whether or not that happens is going to be very indicative of whether they're satisfied overall. Just a very quick moment on digital services. There's a strong movement among residents of the region to access online. We'll talk about that in a minute. We asked people in this survey who opted for their first touch point for their service interaction either to go in person or call and not use the website. We asked them, next time you had to do something similar to that service, how likely would you be to use the website? And in 44% of the respondents said that they would be very likely to try the website first next time. And an additional 22% said they would be somewhat likely. So together that's 66%, which I think is very good. In our other work at Ipsos, we know some of the barriers to going online, which probably fall within the 1/3 who said they wouldn't be very likely, tends to relate to things like habit. Can be very habitual to go in person or call on the phone. It's also about an understanding of whether or not you feel confident you're going to be able to do it right. Particularly with senior citizens, a lot of the concern is about, if I go in person, I know the person's going to look me in the eye and say, don't worry, it's been done and it's done correctly. Whereas going online, there's a little bit of concern about whether or not, in fact, they have succeeded in what they wanted to do. I'm happy to answer questions about how you might mitigate that. And then action items for all municipalities, we usually say One of the barriers is the extent to which your residents understand what, in fact, is available that they could do online, that they don't have to go and visit the region's office to do or call in. So building awareness of what's available, and hand in hand with that is also making more of your services available so that there is more than just a few things that they can tackle on the website without having to use another channel. So what we've seen compared to your 2015 data is we have seen a significant uptick in the percentage of the region's residents who are accessing your website for transactional services. Admittedly, primarily those visits relate to curbside waste pickup, checking the calendar, figuring out what to do if they have a problem with their cart. Those types of requests and information needs are what's driving people. But the uptick itself is a positive move. Overall satisfaction with the people who have visited the website for a transactional service, again, these are primarily public works types service requests or inquiries, is 7.7 out of 10. While that's good, I would say there's room to improve. Work that we have done ourselves at Ipsos would say that this puts you in close to the upper tier of other municipalities, but not right at the top. And the data for that is a little bit outdated, and quite frankly, a lot of municipalities are investing in improving their website, so I want to point out that that's not 2018 or 2017 data. It is a little bit outdated, the comparator data. And then for relational services, the main point I wanted to make here is that there has been a doubling of the residents who have visited the website for relational services from 15% to 32%. And what that's created then is residents are using multiple touch points for relational services, but I don't think that's necessarily a poor thing. It's actually good that they might use 2 services. If the first visit was to find out how to apply, and then they find out they have to meet someone to apply, then they've used 2 channels. So, yeah.
So just to share with you some lessons learned, as Sandra has indicated, there is a strong movement for accessing services online. There's a good potential for moving more residents to access the website first. That's coming in, I think, at 66%. And the drivers of satisfaction for web services different compared to traditional telephone in-person channels. I'm just going to close with a few next steps. The results of the survey will be used to inform development and implementation of service-specific initiatives that are going to be undergone at the Region of Peel. It's going to inform the implementation of the Region of Peel's communication strategy, as well as our digital strategy. And we are going to continue to evolve the survey methodology. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you, Sandra and Shauna, for the very thorough presentation. We do have some councillors on the board. Councillor Rouse.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you both for coming today. Quick question on slide 4. With respect to the long-term care resident family members, this is the first year that we've done the survey for these members, and I'm just hoping that this is going to continue for future for future surveys, or was this a one-off?
Yeah, I think it's going to probably be carried over for the following year.
Okay.
It's not a one-off.
Okay. I think that's an important aspect of the services we provide. And I just want to give a quick shout out to the paramedics who achieved a 9.2 satisfaction rating. So that's good news. Yay. Interesting on the transactional versus relational services. I would think that transactional are typically issues-based, and relational, people are coming to the region for help, so they may feel a higher degree of satisfaction. Would you agree with that, or no?
No, I think that's not necessarily that the fact that they're coming from help implies it's easier to satisfy them. In fact, I might argue the opposite might be true.
Okay. And certainly it seems like the personal touch is still the way to go for a lot of our residents. When it came to perceived timeliness and satisfaction for the transactional services, people don't factor in travel time?
Sorry, can you repeat that one?
When it comes to the perceived timeliness of the satisfaction for their transactional services on slide 9, when people go in person, I find it interesting that they don't factor in their travel time for, it may take them 40 minutes to get there, and even though they may be served in a shorter amount of time, they don't factor that in. I just found that interesting.
Yeah, the question itself is actually the wait when they're there. Like presumably there's a line. It's not necessarily, we're not asking them the time from leaving home to getting there. But I take your point in, there are some people who just, even though it does take 10 minutes and they could probably call in 3, it takes 10 minutes to get there, they prefer, there are some people who still prefer to go in person. And if the service experience is that much better, all the more reason to maybe just keep that up.
Sure. Question, I guess, to staff on the corporate, we bring forward the corporate report? Yes. On page 6 of the corporate report, under Public Works, so this may be a question for Jeanette, when it talks about the development of another payment option, which will provide digital access to a person's water bill and account, where are we with providing pre-authorized payments for our water bills?
That would be part of what we're looking at doing now. We have a lot of opportunity to improve client satisfaction in our water billing. We don't have the ability right now for them to go on and change some of their own information like addresses, billing, like pre-authorized, all of that. They can go online and look at their bills more regularly in between when they get the bills. So that is a key improvement area, and that will all be packaged together.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies.
Councillor Ross, I think also Commissioner Paulsonelli had a response to your first question. I thought you were going to ask some more questions on that first point, and then you went into others, so.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to share that the resident satisfaction surveys in our long-term care division happens annually. So what we do is we feed in that information biannually or every second year into the corporate results. So while it's reflected here as it's the first time, we actually do surveys annually based on our Long-Term Care Homes Act. Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Starr.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm a couple of numbers. The 4,200, I think you said, surveys, those were completed surveys?
Yes.
And how is that done? Telephone, personal, how?
So the execution of the survey varies by service. For the largest share, which was the Public Works, it was a general population survey which was executed primarily by telephone. What happens is a random selection is taken of residents, and they're mailed a letter that says, we're doing a survey to find out how you receive the services and your rating of the services. On that letter is a link to complete the survey online, should they choose. It also indicates that they may receive a phone call to complete the survey over the phone. It gives them the opportunity to opt out. If they do not want to participate at all, they can email the region or phone the region on the number provided and the email address provided to opt out. So those people who didn't complete online our Ipsos survey, then we phone them and completed it by telephone. That's for the Public Works. The methodology varied based on which service it was. I can go through the rest if you like.
So that's done on a basis that somebody's had a service or call in or whatever?
So it's a representative sample of all residents, and they're asked a variety of questions, including...
No, I just, is that somebody that's had something done or working with the region, or is it just random throughout the region?
It's random, and then within the questionnaire, we ask them, and have you had an actual service interaction of the following type? Go through the list, and they say yes or no, and if they say yes, then we probe on what that particular experience was.
What sort of percentage would that be of the random that you send out are actually have had a service?
I don't have that off the top of my head. It would be more than 50%, but I'd have to look to give you a better, more precise response.
If we were to take a look at I think this is the 6th year, I've read in here it started in 2008, so that's sixth time. this is being done. If we were to take a look at a giant matrix of this, what's changed insofar as the satisfaction overall? Because if I recall, in other ones, the 8, and it was 7.9, I think, one time, or close to that. Does it fall into the same range consistently over every survey period?
Through the chair, we found that over the past few cycles that we've run the survey, that we've been quite consistent in around the 7.8, 8 mark.
Okay. Well, then that leads me to another question. If we know we're getting those results on a biannual basis, why are we doing it biannually? Maybe we should be doing it every 3 years or 4 years. And that's part of the question. And what do we do, I should have asked this first, what do we do internally without a survey result, whatever? How does staff follow up on their own, say, whether it's counter help or the health service, or how does staff follow up personally? Or how do you folks know how you're performing without a survey?
Through the chair, we do get some feedback from the program areas. It might be, I think I may need to defer to each program area because we do have different processes right across the different services. So I don't have that information directly in front of me, but I'm happy to get that information and bring it back to you, to council.
So, okay, so I guess the question is, do we do that? Do we actually have group, I guess, interaction or staff interaction with the folks that we've helped or tried to help? Do we do that internally at all without a survey?
Can I defer that to?
And I think, Councillor Starr, to your point, within the presentation and the report, it does note that based on next steps or outcomes, based on what has been found through the survey, that will help guide action plans, for example, in our long-term waste management plan, in our accessible transportation plan. So at a higher level, are you looking for?
No, I understand. I read that part of it. I'm just wondering what we've done in the past to ascertain how well we're doing. If I'm a department head,
right,
I want to know
Okay.
how the folks are doing and how the interaction is. And so are we doing anything internally?
Okay, commissioners are on the board, so Human Services first. Janice.
Thank you, through the chair. So I can give you an example of how we collect feedback and it impacts on our plans. So as clients would call in to Human Services, we would hear that individuals had tried to access the website, but were finding it very confusing. They didn't know how to find the programs. They didn't know how to apply online. So the whole project related to website redesign, Human Services was made a priority based on the feedback that we'd been receiving, perhaps not scientific, but certainly a large volume. And as council will recall, I sent out an email earlier this month that the Human Services website had been redesigned. So we do take the feedback. It may not be as scientific as a survey with a sample size, but we do listen to what our clients are saying, and it does impact on our plans.
Okay.
Okay, also Jeanette wants to respond as well.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So we'd have this survey every 2 years. In between, if we're designing a new communications campaign, for example, we would do some evaluation. First of all, we'd do some focus testing to build into it, and then we'd evaluate whether we're achieving the outcomes. So we'll have evaluations done on particular programs. And we get a lot of feedback, for example, in water and wastewater. So in addition to the feedback every 2 years, we have complaints coming in through the phone lines and emails. And we're looking at how we can pull all that information we get practically on a daily basis to get a complete picture. Because we can't just rely on this high-level survey every 2 years. Another example would be in waste. So you got the high-level results around the waste collection, but what we saw in this survey is that satisfaction with the website to get waste information, which we invested a lot, was extremely high. But we're hearing on our roads communication, access on the website is very low. So we've got to take the learnings from what we've done in waste and apply to roads. So that just gives you some of the examples of how we're using it.
Okay.
Okay. There are two more speakers, Councillor Starr, there's two more that would like to give a response, our Chief Medical Officer, so would you like to hear from them first?
sure,
and then-
yeah.
Okay. Jessica?
Must have struck a chord here.
Thank you. Through the chair, so similar to the other departments, public health performs evaluations, for example, in services that we might provide, like a prenatal clinic education of the clients who attend that. But I think more importantly, we also take a look at those clients that we perhaps aren't accessing that we think would benefit from our services. So we also use our data to understand who's not accessing that. So I'll give you an example from the Healthy Babies, Healthy Children program, which is for new families. It's a home visiting program that helps children to develop optimally for success in life. And we recognized that previously we were not meeting the needs of those families on weekends and through holiday seasons. We were trying to contact them by telephone while they were in hospital after the baby was delivered. And now what we're doing is we've actually rescheduled our staff so that they can attend in person, meet with those families directly, and that's improved uptake in that area.
Okay, and Councillor Starr, yes, there is one more person that would like to give you a response. That's our CFO, Stephen. Oh, two. Oh.
Through the chair, thank you. Just speaking more to Councillor Starr, your first question around the timeliness or doing them on a biannual basis. I think you'll see through the report today that there are 6 services that were conducted through this review that were not done in previous surveys. So we don't always have the same services that are picked up in the biannual survey. The other piece is, over time, we've been shifting the service delivery from in-person more towards corporate contact center, the call center, and then to the website. So really changing how we deliver services to the public. So keeping on top of what the public perception is of the service intervention is helping us guide our next steps and directions on how we continue to improve the service delivery.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. And now, oh, took your name. Oh, got it? Okay, Councillor Starr, back to you.
Well, that's really great to hear. How do we find out in between this 2-year period? Do you plan to give us an update? I mean, from all the heads here. I mean, we have the 7.7, we have the report, we pay the bill, and we go away for 2 years, and we say, oh well, we're all happy because it was 7.7. What happens in between? How do we know that we've identified those areas of concern and that we're actually doing something? How do we here on the Horseshoe?
I think there's an opportunity, through the chair, I think there is definitely an opportunity for us to circle back and provide an update to Regional Council on the developments of from the data that we've collected from the survey, what we've done to enhance our services. And I can definitely take that back and talk to the program areas to see if they have the appetite to do that.
Great.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Last question. How much did this cost us?
I don't know that answer off the top of my head.
Neither do I.
Yeah, that's funny. But I can definitely get that answer for you.
I don't think it's in the report.
Don't know.
Yeah, we didn't put the cost in it.
It's not, I don't think it's in the report.
No.
So.
I'd like to have that brought back. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you. I did have, I think of my one question Jeanette answered, but I did have a question with regards to the emergency shelters. So that was a very low client satisfaction at 5.2. And it notes, there's a note that emergency shelters, there was additional surveys completed. So there is no tracking, though, for 2015. Was it not tracked at all in 2015 for emergency shelters, or?
So I think what happened there was we expanded the number of shelters that were included in the sample in 2017.
Okay.
And it included transitional housing for the first time. So we felt like it would be an apples to
Wouldn't
oranges
compare, okay.
comparison.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, thank you very much. Very good discussion. Councillor, this is for information. Councillor Rass and Councillor Starr, would you like to move the presentation and the report? Moved by Councillor Rass, seconded by Councillor Starr. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, thank you. Moving on to 8.2. Councillor Rass, you wanted this pulled.
Three to me are somewhat related, and I guess my question is, how do we incorporate the results from the satisfaction survey into our comm strategy while serving the diverse needs of Peel residents? Yeah, that's how my brain thinks.
Well, it is, it does make sense, all the same.
Through the chair, we are taking all of the feedback as we make improvements to the website and all of our channels of access, and as we're building our brand of working with you to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our residents. One of the big components that we'll be looking at as we update our website is providing alternate languages other than just English, and taking the feedback on. We do some user experience testing, so we actually have people come in and we test the services that are on the website, what works and what doesn't work, and we can make improvements from that as we go forward as well. But they are all interconnected, that's why they're on the same agenda today. So we will be taking that feedback regularly and making improvements as we go forward.
Okay. When it comes to the service outcomes outlined in the communication strategy, this, I would take it that this is pretty high level. Do you dig deeper and go to a more granular level to identify more benchmarking to see how we're achieving with respect to the services?
We do. We have sub-services under those services. We've actually, that's our service inventory, and it's been a bit of a beast. It's been up to around about 150 services, and we've tried to actually make it make sense. So what's included in the report is just the services that residents would understand and recognize. Beneath those, there are sub-services that we're still working out on how we're going to report metrics on those and how we're doing. But it's a more granular look at that type of stuff.
Great, thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Yes, David, yes.
If I could just speak to that. This is the high level, as Lisa said, service inventory of the 26 services that we provide internally and externally, highest level. If you take, for example, paramedics, the highest level outcome we're looking for is that residents and visitors receive quality pre-hospital care. We have layers and layers of other things that are important to that service that we measure, and a good example would be response times. Council has set response times targets in 6 areas, and we measure those and report back to Council on those response times. And it's the same in many of the, in all of them. There are different levels of efficiency and effectiveness measures that we have that we monitor, and that goes back to Councillor Starr's earlier question about how we adjust service delivery continuously as we monitor those different measures that we keep. So it's not only financial measures that we report in, but if you recall, when we report back annually, actually semi-annually, on our strategic plan, we have a whole level of measures in there about how we're achieving the targets set for certain services. So measures we have, I can assure you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just one quick question with regards to I've noticed there's been, and it's in the strategy here for external communication, much more use of social media and Twitter. How is that being tracked and monitored? To Councillor Starr's point, will there be a report back on that, interim report brought back on that, outside of the general satisfaction survey, which comes every 2 years?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. We're actually just developing a more fulsome social media strategy. It's been a bit ad hoc how we actually use Twitter and other venues of social media, so we're being a bit more purposeful about it, and I'm happy to report back how that's going at a future meeting.
Thank you very much. Councillor Palashi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just on that, I just wanted to say that over the past little while, specifically last year and into this year, I've seen the the amount of social media coming out of the Region Appeal has been unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it, and I've always said that we have a good way to communicate to, we've always done well communicating to the residents, and yet we keep getting better and better at it. So I just wanted to say that because I have noticed it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This report was for information, so Councillor Ross, Councillor Pleshy, would you like to move receipt receipt for information? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. 8.3 is also for information. Seeing no one on the board, moved by Councillor Grove, seconded by Councillor Pleshy. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Item 8.4 was in consent. 8.5 is the minutes of Audit and Risk Committee. Moved by Councillor Ross, seconded by Mayor Thompson. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And moving on to item 9.1, this is correspondence with direction required from Andrew McKee, the Royal Agriculture Councillor Unica.
Thank you, and I see we require direction. I think I've done it a few times, and I'm happy because I think he performs a great role for us. I'm happy to nominate Mayor Thompson to serve as our representative there. He's done it before, and I think he does a magnificent job of it. I think he has a passion for it, so that would be my nomination.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Unica. And Councillor Downey, you would like to second that? So we need that on the board. And it's a recorded vote. I didn't ask him. He didn't put his name on the board fast enough to. So a recorded vote, and you can vote now. Wonderful. Thank you. Congratulations, Mayor Thompson. Okay, and moving on to item 9.2. This was an added item from Chief Jennifer Evans. This is for receipt. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, I guess just more a comment, and we've talked about it. I know several councillors have raised this issue regarding the events. I just have an issue, and this is I'm not sure with members of the Police Services Board, when we talk about revenue generation or alcohol. So I give the example, and I've spoken about, for example, church functions. So Our Lady of Fatima Parish in Brampton, they do an annual feast to revenue generator, certainly, but that's not revenue that they use for anything else besides reinvesting in the community. So that is supporting, food drives, that's supporting the church, the maintenance of the church, and so on. So I just find it difficult when the policing costs exceed to a point where organizations won't be able to make that sort of revenue that they require to invest in essentially what it is. It's investing in our community. It makes our jobs easier. It makes less pressure, it lessens the pressure on our human services. It lessens the pressure on the type of supports we provide out there. So I just hope that this gets reconsidered, or some form of grant gets, I'm a little bit at a loss what we're doing, and I can tell you I've been contacted by various organizations who are concerned about this. When this first came to my attention, this has been a concern, and I just hope that we revisit this. I'm just at a little standstill on what the process is and what we can do. But certainly when I hear church groups tell me that, on one end, they're trying to raise revenue because of the needs of the church, and at the same time, they no longer have that revenue available because the policing cost cuts into it. And I guess one of the other discussions is, do we need, so the requirement of policing becomes always an issue as well, and what are the alternatives? So it's just a frustrating, because when you see members of our community really trying to invest and make a positive impact in our community, and this type of decision really really sort of counters that good spirit.
Okay, Councillor Medeiros, Stephen, our CFO is on the board. speak to this?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. We are working as a result of the discussion that happened just around the budget time last year. So we've made connection with the folks at Brampton and City of Mississauga. And we're actually going to bring forward a report in March on what we've learned in terms of what the policy options are available for council consideration. We're working well with our contacts at both cities to come forward with a plan for council's consideration.
That comes forward in March, did you say?
It'll come forward in March,
Okay.
correct.
And my only concern, through the chair, thank you for the update, but again, when I see here language such as city-run events, I'm hoping that the policy options would encompass also civil society, groups out there who are not necessarily, because to give the city of Brampton or the city of Mississauga, I guess, not charge them for services with the capabilities that the municipalities have from a revenue perspective, I would hope that it also applies to stakeholders.
We can certainly take your feedback as input to the report that we're preparing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Sado.
Thank you. Can I just get some clarification? The money that was paying for this, the funds that were covering this service that has been removed, were those part of the budget funds that we gave to the police through the budget? So regional taxpayers funding? Can someone answer that question?
Certainly through the chair, those would have been funds that were included in the Peel Police budget.
They were in the budget?
They were removed through the 2018 budget process.
Okay, so as regional councillors approving the budget, we could specify where funds that we give to an external organization be spent if we choose to do so, correct? Or not? Or is this solely that the board has taken this away from the community?
Patrick, can you?
This is one of those situations where
Yeah.
regional council's authority does not extend into a line-by-line review of the police budget.
Right,
So
right.
it wouldn't govern this particular element.
Okay, it's unfortunate. Did maybe one of the board members could respond to this? Did the board take a look at funding this through other means rather than through the policing budget? I understand that the board has funding that they use for going to events and things like this. Could that not have been funded out of those funds? There was a recent article in the newspaper that seized goods, for example, funding from that was one means of revenue to fund board activities. And I don't know, Mayor Jeffrey or someone that's been on the board for a while, can you answer?
Councillor McFadden.
Or
Thank you. Actually, after all of this conversation happened around the table, we did bring it back to our Police Services Board, and it has been discussed about how we can fund this at a different level, and we're still looking at that option.
I would hope that that decision would be made soon, as the events are going to be starting up pretty soon as we're moving.
We're looking at grandfathering,
Here.
so we will be looking at that. Probably tomorrow we'll discuss it in
Okay.
caucus again. Thank
Okay,
you.
good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. The feedback I'm receiving from some of the groups that used to be on the receiving end is that they're sure hopeful that we're not going to begin the beginning of a process which begins to look at something for some future date. The expectation, or at least the story I'm telling them, is that we're trying to avoid any bad year, like we're trying to provide interim funding if this meets with council's approval. So I'm hopeful to staff that when we get this is not a short 40-part survey that everybody's got to fill out to find out if they still qualify, because that was not the object of the direction that I recall making at the time, in which there were many nods around this table.
Okay,
More
thank you.
advice than it is a question.
Through the chair, certainly the conversations we're having with the local municipalities at Brampton and Mississauga are around what can we put in place for this year as opposed to punting it down the line to a future budget cycle.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So we need to move receipt of the correspondence, moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Medeiros. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And Madam Acting Chair, back to you.
Thank you very much. I'll now turn the agenda over to Councillor Starr for items related to Public Works.
Okay, the first item on Public Works is 10.1, which has been dealt with, and 10.2, we have a presentation with respect to the Sustainable Transportation Strategy. Brian Hollingsworth and Joe Avsek.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Hollingworth. I'm with the firm IBI Group. I am project manager for the Sustainable Transportation Strategy. I'm with here and will co-present today with Joe Avsek, manager of traffic and sustainable transportation, and we're here to present the Sustainable Transportation Strategy. Why is this study needed? I don't think folks around this room need a whole lot of explanation about that, but Peel Region is growing by a large amount. And if current trends continue as they are today, with people making the same choices in the way they travel, we're looking at about a 40% increase in car traffic. That's, put it into perspective, about 190,000 trips every day in the peak period. While automobiles will remain a significant mode of travel, by all means, addressing growth in their use is critically important for the reasons we all know, including emissions and air quality, impacts on physical activity, impacts on the natural environment, and impacts on other modes, including the ones we're going to talk about today. You'll hear from us talk about sustainable transportation modes or sustainable transportation travel, so I thought it was important to define what we mean by that. Essentially, it's any travel by modes other than a single occupant vehicle. So this includes walking, cycling, transit, but also riding as a passenger in a carpool. We also include targets in the plan for what's called teleworking or working from home, which is also, probably one of the best ways to reduce the impacts on the environment. The Sustainable Transportation Strategy is, in essence, a strategy that lays out policies and actions that will help improve and promote sustainable travel choices. It is very much an action-oriented plan and includes two separate implementation plans. They're called 5-year implementation plans for active transportation and travel demand management, or TDM as we call it. I would say that it's one of the most detailed plans we've ever developed in terms of costing out the actions, identifying roles and responsibilities, and partnerships. A key element of the plan is the modal share targets. The plan sets an overall target of 50% of all trips in the peak period to be made using sustainable transportation modes. This target will require increases across all sustainable modes, walking, cycling, carpooling, but also substantially transit. And you can see in this table, transit will be the future workhorse of sustainable transportation travel in Peel. The targets are mode specific, so it's not just we picked a number. It is very grounded in reality. The targets are context specific and not uniform across the region. They vary by certain trip types and travel markets and local characteristics, and would point out that in many cases, one mode, transit, for example, works very well in an area. In another area, walking and cycling may be more applicable to the types of trips being made in the neighborhood context. I did mention that transit will see the highest rate of change in terms of absolute trips, and many of the strategies in this plan are aimed at helping to ensure that mode share target for transit does become a reality, but also is predicated on the assumption that investments will continue to be made as planned by the area municipalities, Metrolinx, and the province. The mode share targets are consistent with the region's long-range transportation plan and pretty much in line with local area transportation master plans where targets have been identified. Just rounding out the discussion of the targets would emphasize that they are, very much a bottoms-up approach where we looked at individual traffic zones and the characteristics of each zone and decided what was achievable in terms of the mode share shifts for sustainable modes. It is very much a visionary and aspirational, but grounded in reality. Some of the factors, for example, that we looked at cycling, we looked at the proportion of short trips. So we didn't assign a large cycling mode share for, long distance trips. We looked at the actual market, which would be cyclable. Transit, we considered things like travel time competitiveness with the automobile. Before Joe takes over, I will end by highlighting that the obvious point that implementing the sustainable transportation strategy will require a lot of partnerships across departments, across municipalities, and across agencies, all of whom have been involved in the development of the recommendations and part of the working group that we had for this plan. Public input was also key and helped inform the recommendations.
Thank you, Brian. So for the recommendations part, the Sustainable Transportation Strategy recommends over 50 actions that the region should take to enable and encourage sustainable transportation and influence travel behavior. The actions relate to infrastructure, policy, education, and community programs, and are responsive to the region's jurisdiction and particular role for each action. For the short term, from 2018 to 2022, actions have been categorized into 5-year implementation plans. All of our recommendations will support Vision Zero, the ultimate vision for zero collisions causing fatalities and injuries, with programs to reach all road users, including drivers. And the framework for Vision Zero was adopted by Regional Council in December of last year. We're going to be moving with assessing the feasibility of bus or high occupancy vehicle lanes on regional roads with a potential pilot project. We're looking at streetscaping and walkability improvements for specific to pedestrian improvement corridors that we have identified and through highway interchanges where we've noticed deficiencies. We're going to be implementing standalone programs for cycling network improvements with the latest design guidelines that we have for those type of networks. We're going to be promoting walking, cycling to transit stations such as through promotions and planned group rides to stations. We're also going to be supporting transit agencies' research and testing of innovative transit services, for example, on-demand partnerships with ride-hailing services. We're also going to be identifying opportunities for third-party carpool lots, such as existing lots with excess capacity at key community destinations. We're going to be promoting carpooling through community-based social marketing programs. We're also going to be studying the feasibility of satellite workplaces, which could be provided by government organizations or businesses or NGOs. The expected impact for the sustainable transportation strategy is we want to be able to reach the 50% sustainable mode share, and it's essential to reduce, it's essential for us to do that to reduce the growth of traffic and congestion, and we want to be able to support healthy built environments. Compared to continuing with current trends, reaching the 50% sustainable mode target by 2041 would result in, through our business case, $400 million worth of annual savings in the cost of congestion due to lost productivity and personal delay, $80 million in annual savings in costs related to carbon dioxide emissions, and $262 million in annual cost benefit of health impacts of increased walking and cycling. So supporting the sustainable transportation modal shift is going to require increased and stable funding sources. Investment needed to implement the STS, or the Sustainable Transportation Strategy, to 2041, we're estimating at about $207 million for active transportation infrastructure and 1.8 million annually for non-infrastructure related programs. So staff is working to identify the appropriate allocation of these funding and resources to deliver the programs and enable the increasing sustainable mode share. So council will be recommended accordingly through our annual budget process on the funds that we will be requiring or asking for. So in conclusion, the sustainable transportation mode shift is essential to managing growth in a way that delivers the region's community for life vision. We rely on a broad range of partnerships to carry out the sustainable transportation programs that we're working on and infrastructure projects. Developing the strategy has enabled internal and external partnerships to be created and strengthened. And the sustainable transportation strategy's vision is reinforced by the region's draft long-range transportation plan, and it's coordinated with the growth management planning process. Thank you. And any questions?
Okay, we have a number on the board here. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation and great presentation. I guess this really shows what the cost of growth is to us, and this is why it is important for us around this table to make those fiscally responsible decisions. That's a whole lot of money that I just saw in your presentation that we're going to need for future transportation needs. So thank you for taking the proactive approach on this. I think it's great. My question is, with regards to the carpool lot that we built a few years ago at Mayfield and Highway 50, that lot really sits, I think, half empty, which is a shame because we spent a lot of money at the region to build that lot. And I'd like to see that lot being utilized more so than it is today. When we built the lot, one of the things we talked about was connecting Viva Transit and Brampton Transit into that lot. That hasn't been done, and I'm just wondering where we are with those discussions, or are we even having those discussions with Brampton and Vaughan?
Yeah, I think the key, you make a really good point through the chair, that having those transit connections at the lots is key to sort of generate that traffic, so there are more options. As you are aware, we did have, we did realize that there was low use of that lot, so we did the community-based social marketing to market the lot more, and we've had some success with that. But those talks with the transit agencies to get transit there and those connections are ongoing, so we're still having those conversations.
Thank you, and at some point, I'd like to have an update on those talks and where we are in the process, because as we can promote that lot and we can do all the things we need to do to promote the lot, but if there's no connection there to take people where they need to go, people are just not going to use that lot. And the other thing that I would ask that maybe you follow up with Metrolinx, when they were here last time doing their presentation, I did ask for additional schedule on the service that they currently have for Bolton, because I don't think that it's enough. Now, they said that they would look at it and see if it's feasible or not, so maybe that also ties into the use of that lot. So if I can leave that with you and maybe get an update at a later time, that would be great. Thanks very much.
Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for the presentation. It's really exciting stuff where we're going towards. It does really, as Councillor Grove says, does outline the significant investment. I think a couple points which you really need to focus on is that coordination piece. So the connectivity, can you just speak to us about how important it is, the connectivity between, in terms of the pathways, and that requires that coordination between the region and the cities and the municipalities?
I think it's a great point, and I always say every transit trip starts as a walking or cycling trip, so it's really essential. We do in the plan identify what we call pedestrian corridor improvements, both at the corridor level, but also some intersections where we've noticed there's a safety concern or, just uncomfortable from a pedestrian perspective. And that will require cooperation with the local municipalities. Some of them are under local jurisdiction. And, encourage you to look at the map of where we've suggested pedestrian corridor improvements and tell us if we've got it right or not.
And through the chair, I really think, and why I keep stressing connectivity, I think that really is the underpinning of how successful this strategy would go forward. So if you think of, as a member of CVC, we're trying to build the trail, working with our City of Brampton and that type of coordination. So the coordination I can't really stress enough. The second point that you raised in the report is regarding the employers. But the other angle I'd like to see, in terms of raising awareness, in terms of making a business case, and where am I going with this, in terms of building that, I don't know if it's infrastructure, but those facilities that employers should have to allow. So I give an example, someone who wants a bike to work and he'll go to his employer, but obviously he needs to take a shower to change, he needs a place to park his bike and so on and so on. And a developer in my area over there close to County Court invested in that type of facility. And a couple of years ago when I first got elected, he talked about that there wasn't much interest or uptake. As of recently, as of last year, in a conversation, he said that he did notice some employees starting to use that. And trying to incentivize that the employer, and I don't know how we do it, or raising the awareness of providing those facilities to allow someone who wants to walk to work or allow someone who wants to use a different mode. So I don't know what that would be in our communication strategy, but if we can offer some type of incentivization on new builds in terms of to build those facilities to support our active transportation plan.
Through you, Mrs. Chair. Through our new development guidelines, it is recommended to implement those types of facilities. And also, there is opportunities to reduce the amount of parking at some of these facilities, to which, can benefit the developer as they can, build more units by reducing the amount of parking and promoting more sustainable modes of transportation to their development. So there are incentives to take the new approach through our new development guidelines to produce those and implement those facilities in their developments.
And just lastly, a couple months ago, going through some of the schoolyards, and I noticed in terms of, simple things as having bike racks. And I know, again, that's school board, but in terms of our role with promoting active transportation, I guess, trying to also raise that awareness with the local schools and the school boards, the importance of having that type of, I guess, infrastructure available to promote that type of lifestyle.
And we do have programs right now where we're working with the schools on implementing bike racks at the schools.
Thank you. This is really great.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Enjoyed your presentation here today. Thank you very much. As you already know, moving people and goods through Caledon, north-south, is a huge challenge. We've been leapfrogged, and everybody's coming down the roads, but they're coming down the town roads, putting an enormous amount of pressure on the town of Caledon. At the growth meeting, Joe, you weren't at it on the 13th. I think it was the 13th last week. Other members of your team were there, but there was a gentleman that spoke up about the rail system that actually goes from Orangeville right down through the west side of Caledon, continues on to Brampton. It might even go to Mississauga. There's 55 kilometers of track that is being underutilized. It might be a good opportunity for the region to get into discussions, to investigate the opportunity, because as I understand, the people who are running it are from Alberta. They aren't going to be running it anymore. And it might be it's already there. I'm sure it needs to be upgraded. But it's a good opportunity, and I'd hate to miss it if there's something that the Region Appeal might be able to do. And at the very least, understand what is going to go on with that rail system. So I'm just wondering if it just can be direction to staff to take a look at it and review it and see if there is any opportunity for the Region Appeal and moving goods and people.
Maybe I see the CAO has got his hand up, maybe you can answer.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I've already had a number of discussions with CAO in Orangeville about this and about the issues they have with, as you mentioned, the operator not continuing. And I've actually had maps done to show where the rail line is compared to the existing and planned active transportation routes within and through Peel. And I will be discussing it with the CAOs and Commissioners of Public Works this Friday morning at a meeting.
Right. Timing is everything. That's great. Thank you very much for that information. I appreciate it. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you for that great segue. Mayor Thompson.
Yes, thank you, and it's a good report. And to come back, I think as we even saw this morning with the 427, is the ability to find opportunities in future infrastructure builds on where we can capitalize on places for people to park for kiss and ride. But I know I have one resident very passionate about cycling, an ability that I've even found with young people, finding the adequate bike racks at bus stops. You know, their first point to the bus stop is being able to get off that bike, leave the bike there for the day and continue on. Even if you go to Mount Pleasant now, it's winter time, but in the summertime, if you rode your bike to go to Mount Pleasant to catch the train or the bus to go, there's no place to, and I know that's go, but there's no place to lock up your bike. Everything's utilized quite heavily. Well, Paul Pleshy's chain link fence, but the challenge is I think there's huge demand, but I'm just saying for future growth, probably have it in the report. I know it was discussed, I heard it at the meetings, but I was just saying that I didn't see that, but I'm just saying to create the infrastructure, if we want people to cycle and ride and find other modes, we have to try and find an environment that they have the ability to change modes of transportation by the ways of, they're not always going to take their bike on the bus. So is there a place that they can, even behind the bus shelters, find a way to start to establish racks?
Yeah, I think you make a great point. You have to have the infrastructure there to get people to actually do what you want them to do. And I think we actually have an action item around that.
Yeah. Okay, if I missed it, I apologize, but I just know that it was quite passionate from when I was at the community one that I was at, that I just want to make sure we just haven't missed it, that's all.
Thank you. Councilor Pleshy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on to David's work, I just want to make sure that those communications with that Orangeville line are being had with the city of Brampton. I don't want heads butting.
Yeah, through you,
you
Mr. Chairman.
read
Yeah,
between the lines.
I will be discussing it.
Joe Patushka at the city of
Joe
Brampton has been.
and CAO will be at the meeting on Friday.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Miles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I guess when I look at a number of the reports that we've had in front of us today on public works related items, we really can't be successful unless we work and align ourselves closely with the area municipalities, because we're doing transportation master plans. We share roads with the cities, the regions, the province. So when we get reports like the Sustainable Transportation Plan, which is an amazing plan, I guess the question starts coming to mind, how closely do we actually align ourselves and work with the municipalities when we are doing these kinds of studies?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we work very closely with the City of Mississauga, Town of Caledon, and the City of Brampton. They're actually doing their transportation master plan right now, and we've been closely aligned. They've been at all of our stakeholder meetings. We have been coordinating with them on the cycling routes between the regional network and the city network. So we have very close working relationships and a lot of collaboration.
So when you're doing your design work for road expansions, et cetera, would you stop and ensure that, I know you're working with the cities because the cities need the linkages for the pathways and biking trails, et cetera. But are you also looking at connectivity to the trails and the pathway systems as well in all the new design work that you're doing?
Yes, when we're looking at putting in active transportation infrastructure through this strategy here, the routes that we've planned tie in to the city of Brampton routes, and for a larger part of that, the big picture, the connectivity of it. So yes, we do, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So just going to actually say thank you. I know that you've met with City of Mississauga staff, cycling, active transportation staff at the City of Mississauga, going through the cycling master plan update as well, and our transportation update, the City of Mississauga. I can't stress enough, and it's mentioned in the report as a very important action item, the multimodal level of service methodology. I think it's essential. It impacts, in terms of complete streets, it impacts and looks at coordination of different departments. So transportation and works, community services, and also planning. And I think that is so important, and then health services and human services as well. And I just think that, I just wanted to emphasize that multimodal level of service methodology, I think we have to take that back and ensure that that is ingrained in everything at the local level as well as the regional level from a connectivity standpoint. So just wanted to emphasize that, and thank you very much for all the work in this report.
Okay, seeing no other speakers on the board, thank you very much for the presentation, and moved by Councillor Cook, seconded by Mayor Thompson. All in favor, those opposed, carried.
Recorded vote.
Oh, recorded vote. Thank goodness the clerk's here. Okay, moving on to, oh, sorry. Okay. We're okay? Okay, moving on to 10.3, the comments on the draft regulations for promoting affordable housing. This is here for information. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, moved by Councillor Gibbs. Oh, Councillor Parrish, sorry.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry Nando's left the room. He did an absolutely amazing rant yesterday at Mississauga Council about the inclusionary zoning rules. He was masterful, and hopefully Bonnie can drag him back in here. One of the big problems we found immediately was it doesn't apply to rental buildings. So developers who are building the most accessible type of housing for people who don't have a lot of money are not getting any breaks on this at all. The second problem was, of course, that the cities in the region are going to have to put a lot of money into this, and there's nothing from the province, once again, except lots of advice. The other thing I found quite interesting, though, the 20-year affordability with an extra 10-year attached to it, and some of the rules for selling so that you don't make a cash killing on them, all come from Habitat for Humanity. They've had this plan in for a couple of years, and it's obviously been picked up by the province, but generally speaking, we're hoping that Mississauga puts in a pretty negative response to this. We thought it was really throwing all the burden on the municipalities and onto the region instead of the province actually coming forward with something that would work. So as I say, I'm sorry Nando's not here. He did this much better yesterday. He went on one of his really good tears, and it was point by point by point. So perhaps we should get his speech from yesterday, have it printed, and make sure it's included in the response from the region. Did you find him, Bonnie? Okay, no Nando.
Okay, seeing no other speakers, Councillor Parrish, would like to move that? And second by Mayor Jeffrey. All those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Next item is 10.4. Would you like to do a rant? I'm sorry, you're fine? Okay. We're going to have your speech published and put in the Hansard. Okay. 10.4.
You haven't voted, Ronnie.
I thought we did.
You haven't yet.
Oh, record it again? All those in favor, those opposed, carried. Sorry. Okay, I'll speak slowly. 10.4. That's also in regards to 11.1 on the correspondence. Any comments, questions? I think Councillor Parrish, you said you wanted to speak to that. 10.4? That was, no, that's fine now? Okay. Any other? Okay, Councillor Fonseca, moved by Councillor Fonseca, moved by, and seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All, recorded vote. Catch on to the system one of these days. Okay, 10.6 and 10.7 have been dealt with, and 11.1.
10.5.
Oh. Well, that was a test. 10.5, proposed land needs for the great, that's a thing, that's the one I think, Councillor Parrish, you indicated. Okay. You're on.
I was just, had the letter brought forward, it's to do with all this, that went to the minister regarding the Ninth Line lands, which it's not really my business, but I wanted the, a report from the CAO on what response we're getting from the Minister of Municipal Affairs on the Ninth Line.
I had a discussion this morning with the deputy, well, actually the assistant deputy minister who's been assigned to this work, and they are looking at options. There's a meeting, I think, in 2 weeks, March 6th, I think she's, with the ADM, senior staff from the city and the region on options for the Ninth Line. As she described it to me, the challenge that they have is that all the work that we did and the city did in preparing for the ROPA was done under the old regulations, and they're trying to find a way to have that work satisfy the requirements of the new regulations without having to redo the work. So that's the update I got as of 9 this morning.
And are you feeling comfortable that they really are working towards this, or they're just giving us the usual snow job?
No, I feel comfortable that they are sincerely trying to help us resolve this. It's of no interest to them not to resolve it. So I believe they are sincere in their efforts.
Right, thank you.
Mayor Thompson.
I got to say, it's a good report, but here's the challenge, especially with the East-West corridor, the challenges that we have with our GO. I know Brampton's been asking for more access for GO, similar to Bolton. Vaughan, we're all asking for a GO line there, as well as the East-West corridor. They're asking us to intensify, which we're all trying to do, under the new methodology that they're asking us to do. They're asking us to do all this stuff, but they're falling way behind on their infrastructure. Look at where we are at the hospitals. It was not supposed to be our responsibility, and look at how much more we're paying in to do hospitals and urgent care facilities. And all of a sudden now we're going to be holding the bill, now that they're not going to be talking about highway, they're saying at this point. Does this mean that our taxpayers are going to be picking up more of this to take the growth that the province is asking? Nando, I've heard you, I don't know how many times, saying how much more do I have to take in my community? With the LRT, you're going to get it. But it's nice we got the LRT, but the challenge is you can't stop there. Where are they to help us get where we need to go? This is a really good report, but there's a lot of lacking, and what it's telling me is If we can't get the province to come up with their fair share and the feds to come up with their fair share, and if we are going to continue to build and develop as we are, guess what? We as taxpayers are picking up the difference on this, like what we have with the hospitals. So I'm just saying, I think we all have to be wary and we all have to be extremely cautious going forward. And I'm saying, even with the growth committee that we have, I think there is more work now to come to say, okay, we figured out our cost financing, but the stuff that no one else is coming to the table with, who's picking that up? So this is a huge, huge challenge that we got to figure out how we're going to get there. And I know there's no real question, but it's a comment that I think we need to be extremely careful. They've got us on this treadmill, but is how we're going to get off it without costing us a whole lot more. And to me, I think the biggest costs are not being addressed.
Councillor Sato.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your interest, Councillor Parrish, in the Ninth Line lands. I wish the other ward councillor and myself had been made aware that staff had a meeting scheduled with the ministry. We just heard about it this morning. So I would like to ask that more constant communication by staff to the ward councillors who represent the Ninth Line lands going forward. This has been extreme frustration for me and for, I know, for Councillor McFadden as we've gone through this process. And I think what frustrates me more is that when those lands were part of my ward, we went through an extensive process with the region of Halton, and staff are nodding their heads, and there was an official plan in place that actually had a higher density than what is being proposed in our OP today. And when those lands became part of the city of Mississauga, when we finally got the boundary change, we were told in writing by the province of Ontario that the region of Peel had to adopt the official plan of the region of Halton official plan. So today there still is an existing official plan, which I think it was about a 12,000 density, roughly that. That plan exists today. If Mississauga was to go ahead and say, well, we're going to build, or we're going to plan our zoning based on that official plan, I don't see what the province could do about it, because they're the ones that said you have to take that official plan. So all of this time, we've been working 5 years now, 4 or 5 years, to get this ROPA through. And I really wish that when I suggested we do it as part of ROPA, it was at 24 or 25, I forget which number, and staff talked us out of it. I wish I hadn't let you, Armin, talk us out of it, because I think it would have been simpler to have just included it. It's very unique. It's not like we're taking greenfield land that has no planning on it. Province approved an official plan. It is totally different. And I'm just very frustrated that now the province is saying, well, you've done all your planning based on old, not new. So maybe what we should do is turn around and say, fine, we'll go back to the Halton regional plan, and Mississauga will base our plan on that and see what the province says, because, they're talking out of both sides of their mouths with this. And I'm not suggesting we go back to the Halton plan, because we came this close to appealing it to the OMB. I mean, it was not a really good plan. But it just really is very, very frustrating to have gone through this for so many years and then be told that we're premature and everything else. So, with all due respect, David, having meetings with staff at the ministry, having all of these meetings, I think it's time that the ward councillors be included in these meetings, and that we lend a political push to this and remind them of what they have already approved, because I'm just not seeing it happening the way I think it should be happening. And I've been dealing with planning in Greenfield and regional official plans, and since I came on council, and I sat on the committee that brought forward the very first Region of Peel official plan. So I can tell you, I've had it up to here with official plans. But, you know, it just, my mind boggles by this. But also, communication to the 2 ward councillors. I wasn't told about a meeting on March 5th, 6th, or whatever it was. Sue's shaking her head. We're looking at each other saying, did you know about this? And it took a question from a councillor who doesn't represent the area to get the information brought forward. So, you know, I think you can sense my frustration on this, and I'll shut up at this point in time. Or I may say something I may regret.
Okay, don't do that. Councillor Maderos.
Through the chair, and I guess along the lines of Councillor Sato, I guess to staff, when we discussed ROPA, there was a recommendation by Brampton staff that it was too mature for us to go on into discussing ROPA 241, and at the time, it was, I guess with the changes and now with the not knowing the methodology, it's just, I guess it's, I guess the question would be in terms of there's no impact on the allocations. And there will be, from the report, or there's going to be limited impact on the allocations. But there's still a lot of invariables in terms of, from what I can assess from the report. So can you tell me when the type of impact, so I guess waiting for the province, how significantly that may impact it? I see the report, if you can just speak to what type of impact that we will have in terms of the allocations.
So I'm going to start at a high level, and I know there's some technical experts willing to jump in and provide more details, but certainly the work or the land budget methodology that came out from the province is quite consistent with how staff approached developing the ROPA in the first place. So the stall that we have now is actually not associated with the land budget methodology. There's feedback that you see in the report to the province in terms of some concerns that we had, particularly with the hamlets in Caledon and how the density is allocated to the greenfield, and certainly the staff can provide a little bit more detail. So I don't know that it was premature. Were we ahead of the game? We've put a lot of work into, and trying to reduce the risk of growth for Peel and trying to line up all of the ducks. The province did come up with a lot of legislative changes this past year, and we are fairly confident with land budget methodology that wasn't a significant roadblock for us. The GTA West Corridor, on the other hand, has been a roadblock for us.
I guess through the chair, my understanding, and I guess I'll let staff, but significant, so the work that we did and where we're positioned, it's not a great, we're not so far off. It's not a great impact, meaning that our planning and I guess there will be minor adjustment based on what, I guess the London budget methodology that will come out.
Correct, based on the land budget methodology as we see it today, and with hopefully some amendments around the hamlets in Caledon, that we're actually in a really good spot with the land budget. There will be some refinements, but not material refinements to the allocations.
When do we expect those changes to?
The challenge we have right now is the province has it out for a comment. Their comments and their timing is, I think, is late March in getting back. So it's a tight timeline for us. That being said, we're on hold as we assess the impact of the GTA West Corridor.
So just to add a little bit more detail in terms of the implications of the land budget methodology on the work that we've been doing for quite some time now, I guess the first thing to note would be that generally we see that the draft land budget methodology that's been released by the province as a positive thing, in that it provides a comprehensive guideline. It reflects best practices, it's transparent, it's pretty consistent with the work that us as regions have been doing over a long time, and the robust work that we've done in our whole growth management work. There will be some minor adjustments required, as as the commissioners noted, around some of the calculation methodology, around the documentation. They've provided very specific templates that we need to fill in terms of the way we document the work, and some technical changes to calculations and that, but very minor. And we don't expect that the results of that land budget methodology will affect kind of the overall distribution, the planning work, the infrastructure work that we've been working on. The main impact in terms of timing, as Commissioner noted, is around the process. It is just a draft that they've produced, and in the methodology, they've also included some direction around consulting with the province on the work and getting their input and I guess support before we actually bring forward an amendment for council adoption. So there's that timing thing, in that if it's not for a month or two until they actually bring forward an approved methodology, it would affect our timing. And then I guess the other thing that's just touched on in the report here is some of the other issues that we are stepping back to look at, particularly with the item that was mentioned earlier around the GTA West announcement.
Thank you.
Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. On page 1057, it does mention that staff indicated due to the announcement of the cancellation of the corridor, or at least reevaluation of a smaller corridor, regional staff will reevaluate matters including corridor protection policies. Now, this corridor protection policy, is that to identify, well, the corridor has already been identified, is that to refine, the intent is to refine that corridor to accommodate a 400 series type road, or to accommodate a municipal regional road?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, what that's referring to is associated with the provincial initiative around the GTA West has been a whole series, as councils were aware of, a corridor protection measures. There was an original study area, corridor protection area, and that was reflected in some proposed policies in the regional official plan and other plans. And then they narrowed it down through that process to a focus study area. Again, some policies around that. With this new announcement, they have sort of modified that yet again. They've indicated that they will not be pursuing a highway for the corridor, but they have indicated that they will be continuing with some reduced corridor protection. They've produced some mapping of a narrower corridor along along sort of the general alignment of the focus area, smaller area generally, and indicated that they are going to study that over the next 9 to 12 months for other infrastructure, including utilities, electrical transmission, and transit. So as part of this work, we're going to be looking at the corridor protection policies that we have and that were implemented, and the processes we have in place and protocols to provide for that.
So through the chair, are you saying that you want to do the reevaluation to see whether the provincial corridor is adequate, or perhaps, I mean, anyone with a bit of common sense will tell you that we're going to need another highway in that corridor, probably sooner rather than later, if that area is going to develop to its envision, as it's been envisioned. So what are we doing? Are we going to be saying, look, we really believe that we're going to need this wider corridor, and we're going to protect that for that? Is that one of the exercises we're going to be doing?
So we're developing a work plan for all this. As you can imagine, it's kind of fresh news. But the idea is to not just look at what the province has proposed in their announcement, but also look at the regional interest in this, and what, in addition to what the province may be doing, what's the interest from Peel in terms of broader corridor protection. It may very well be for other infrastructure beyond what the province is considering. And of course, in doing that, you know, I need to say that we would not be doing that in isolation. We'd be doing that in collaboration with other affected stakeholders, our local municipal colleagues, and also our neighbors in Halton and York, who are affected by this announcement as well.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that. And through the chair, I think Mayor Thompson has a legitimate concern that the local municipalities may end up fitting the bill for this eventually. And that may be the provincial plan. We're just walking into a bit of into a trap because, as we know, the province is, their debt levels is probably can't afford any more debt. So they're looking for ways to minimize their costs and pass it on to the municipalities. So it looks like Councillor Thompson, you might have a good concern. But anyway, we need it one way or another. It has to be done. So it's a good thing that staff is looking into that, support that. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Thompson.
Well, since we have Adrian here, I got a question for you. So continuing on for the next 10, 12 months that they're going to do this study, in your opinion, does this mean that we might get an EA completed out of this from what we've started? Because we have a lot of investment here.
Well, they have clearly indicated that their study is not going to be under the EA. So whatever they kind of do would then have to be implemented presumably by an EA. So, yeah.
So and that's my second part of the question is, are we going to be starting back at ground zero again with all the work that we've done?
Absolutely not. I mean, we've done a lot of work with a great deal of consideration of options. There's been transportation strategies and employment strategies. I know we're kind of there is more uncertainty perhaps around this issue, or remains uncertainty around this issue, and we'll have to manage our way through that. And that's what we're doing at the moment, is stepping back, look at our work program, and coming back. We'll be coming back to council with a recommendation around that work program to make sure that we fully consider the information that we have today and what we can, and make a recommendation around those timelines in our work program.
Saying that, I know the public information meeting for the Mayfield West was delayed. And I like to know why, because it's all below the Etobicoke Creek. It's got nothing to do with the highway corridor whatsoever. Yes, it's in the vicinity, but to me, I just want to know what, the reason why for that knee jerk. To me, it's timing. We're walking into an election, and it's putting everybody at, with this delay. I'm just a little concerned. Like, I know we agreed to allow Ninth Line to move forward, but this was kind of promised, and here we are. Can you give me a little bit of clarification for this? Because I'm still at a loss why it was canceled for today.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, the work that we did for the growth management work, as you'll recall, included some comprehensive evaluation of scenarios. It included an employment strategy, a transportation strategy, financial strategy, all in an integrated way. And we recognize that embedded in the assumptions around that work was that the planning for the highway would continue. And with the announcement that the highway will not continue, we recognize that we do need to step back and take a look at some aspects of that work. The employment strategy, the employment forecasts, and the distribution of the types of employment, and the transportation strategy, and the alignment between the employment and transportation strategy, and also the financial aspects. And so we want to take a look at that and incorporate that into our work program. And with those changes, there's an expectation that there may be some revisions to the policies and the mapping, which would have necessitated another statutory public meeting in any case. So the prudent course was to reschedule that. We did proceed, though, with the open houses as a great opportunity to inform the public of the work that has been done to date and get some really good feedback on that work to incorporate into our steps going forward. So.
No, and I understand that, but with Mayfield West, it was just correcting a marginal error of a boundary for residential development. I was just wondering why we couldn't go forward with it.
Yeah.
And I understand it's mapping. Okay, I'll accept that. But when do you think we can get this back on the ground again? Because we are coming into an election season here, and I guess that's my next question.
So we're working away on a work program, and it would be intending to bring that to council or growth management committee in April. April, I think, is the next growth management committee.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Some great questions and comments. Any other further comments? If not, can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor McFadden, seconded by Mayor Thompson. All those, is this recorded? Recorded vote. It passes. The next 5 items are consent items, so I think I'm done. Back to you, Madam Acting Chair.
Thank you very much. And with everybody's indulgence, I'm going to call a lunch break. We'll be back at 10 to 1.
Just before we break for lunch, Steve has the answer to.
Steve has,
The answer to Councillor Stott's question.
just to tie up something on the to-do list, there is a cost for the Ipsos survey that was done for Councillor Starr.
Yeah, so with respect to Councillor Starr's question, the cost to provide the survey design, conduct the survey, the analysis and reporting out to council was $228,000, and that was a competitively bid contract.
Thank you.
Okay. I know it doesn't look like there's a lot left on the agenda, but there is actually, so I'm going to call a break. So if we can come back at 10 to 1?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask members of council to please take their seats so we can reconvene the meeting? No. Okay, the next item on our agenda are the items related to health, and I will ask Vice Chair Councillor Gibson to handle this portion of it. Councillor Raz asked that something be removed.
Thank
from
you,
consent.
Madam Acting Chairman. We have a big agenda for health today. Councillor Raz, you pulled out the communication 13.1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, just a very quick question to Dr. Hopkins. the $16,000 for additional, added to our base funding, with up to $20,000 in a one-time funding. I'm just wondering, is this enough, and what precisely is it going to be used for? And I know that it's for the needle exchange program, but are there opportunities to use it in other areas like the Noxalone kits?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So this is the amount we had originally requested from the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care as part of our 2017 budget, which we received the results on in late fall of 2017. They originally did not give us this funding, but then later in January, they did add it on. So we had requested this, we're very happy to receive it. In terms of, is it actually enough? What we're in the process right now is trying to really get a deeper understanding of what the need is in the community, and we're doing that in a few different ways. One is through a comprehensive health status report, and there will be more information coming to council at the end of probably 2018, beginning of 2019. On that, we will also be bringing specifically an opioid report in May, which will have further information on that as well. We do believe there is an unmet need, however, in the community as well, and we appreciated very much council supporting a second mobile van that could go around in the community and support with outreach people who are using drugs and using needles. In terms of this specific funding pot, it is very limited what we can spend the money on. This is specific to supplies, so we cannot spend it on any staff. It has to go to supplies, and this would be needles, syringes, disposal units for those as well. Naloxone, we received some additional funding for that already, so that was part of the budget presentation. We received $250,000 from the ministry in base funding for the naloxone, and we are making use of that. And the naloxone kits are free of charge from the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, so we don't require additional funds to obtain those.
How much was our original funding request for the needle exchange program?
Through the chair, I believe it was $37,000, yeah.
Okay, so we're not too far off in terms of what we received. Thank you very much.
Hey, Councillor Rez, would you move receipt, please? Seconded by Councillor Miles. Do you need a recorded vote? No? All in favor? Thank you. And that's how a good chairman gets you a very big agenda. Back to you, Madam Acting Chair.
Has nothing to do with wanting to get out of here early. I'll turn the items related to human services over to Councillor Martin Medeiros.
Thank you, Chair. Members of council, you have before you item 14.1, Social Housing Apartment Improvement Program, requesting authority to participate in award funds. Are there any questions, comments? Moved by Councillor Grove, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All in favor? Recorded. Recorded vote, please.
I can vote now?
You can vote now, yes.
Awesome.
I meant to tell you. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, great. And our second item is the redevelopment Peel Housing Corporation's East Avenue site, City of Mississauga, Ward 1. I'll let you second it, but I'll let the ward councillor move it. So moved by, yes, Councillor Cook, my apologies. Moved by Councillor Cook, seconded by Councillor Miles. All in favor?
No, recorded.
Recorded as well. Okay.
I think I pushed the wrong button, guys. Can we reset that one? Yeah. Sorry. There you go. Yeah.
No.
We have to vote again?
Yeah, sorry, just a second.
Okay, vote
Okay,
again.
go for it. Sorry about that. Yep. You over there, Mayor Thompson? Councillor Scovieri, if you could.
Okay, great. And lastly, we have communication.
Those were on the consent agenda, they're done.
Oh, yeah, it's, okay, back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've actually made a suggestion to the clerk that maybe when the agenda is printed, you could an R could be put beside the items requiring the recorded vote. Make it easier as we're going through. The next item on the agenda is 16.1. It's a summary note. We did discuss this a little bit on a previous agenda item with regard, or 16.1. Sorry. Under other business, there's two items under 16. The first is the summary note, the province not moving forward with the highway for the GTA West Corridor. We did discuss that a bit earlier. If somebody wants to move it, moved by Councillor McFadden, seconded by Councillor Ionica. All in favor? That's carried. The next item on the agenda is 16.2. It's, I'm going to let the clerk handle it from here, I think, because there's some housekeeping items as a result of the new appointment today that need to take place.
Thank you, yes. Welcome Councillor Cook to fill the vacancy that was left by Councillor Tovey. And there are also 7 committees that Councillor Tovey was on that also have vacancies. Of the 7 committees, 2 don't require an additional councillor to be appointed if council doesn't feel it's necessary. The 2 that don't require an appointment are the Emergency Management Program Committee and Housing Options for Older Adults. Well, they can be appointed, but it's not required. The other committees, there's 5 others. 1, the Hanlon Feeder Main and Mississauga City Centre Transmission Main Advisory Group requires Councillor Cook to be appointed because of his being ward councillor. And the other 4 committees are the Growth Management Committee, Government Relations Committee, the Credit Valley Conservation, and Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. So those are the remaining committees that require appointments. So we could go through and take a nomination for.
I actually have
I'll
Mayor
turn it back
Crombie on
to-
the board.
I'll turn it back
Yeah.
to you for the.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie.
Thank you. Our council passed a motion that we appoint our Chair of Planning, George Carlson, to the empty seat at Growth Management, and we ask that since Councillor Unica is the Vice Chair of Growth Management, that he be elevated, take over Councillor Tovey's spot as Chair. But it is a position we held, so we'd like to continue to hold.
No. Mayor Thompson is vice chair,
So
actually.
he gets elevated automatically?
No, the
Oh,
chair
the-
and vice chair would be determined at the
Got it.
committee meeting,
Okay, so
not
we,
at the council.
at Mississauga Council, we nominated and approved Councillor Carlson to fill this, Councillor Tovey's seat at Growth Management.
So you're nominating Councillor Carlson
And
here?
he agrees, because he agreed at council.
You'll need a-
He's our Chair of Planning.
Okay. So we'll need a motion to appoint Councillor Carlson to the Growth Management Committee from Regional Council.
That's correct.
So you're moving that motion, Mayor Crombie, and seconded by Councillor Starr? Do we want to, why don't we just call the vote on that, and then we'll move through the other 3 remaining committees?
Thank you.
Okay?
Sure, and we won't do it as a recorded vote until the end, and we'll do 1 recorded vote for everybody. Is that all right?
Sounds great to me. So the next, okay, Councillor Mahoney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to put Councillor Michael Paleshi forward for TRCA, if he would accept it. Unless Councillor Cook wants to go, but
Do you have a seconder?
I'll need a seconder for that. There's some chatter around the table. Do you have information that would be helpful to this discussion? Okay. Sure.
It's not going on. I just thought perhaps it would be the right thing to do on the other committees that Councillor Cook get first right of refusal, since he's filling in Councillor Tovey's position, who sat on TRCA, CVCA, GR, and IRAC.
And I hear you, Mayor Crombie. It is a decision of this council as to whether or not that right of first refusal be granted. At this point, I have a nomination for Councillor Paleshi.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to withdraw that and offer it to Councillor Cook if he wants. I have no problem with that, and if he does not want to do it, I would put Councillor Palashi forward. It's entirely up to you.
I'm fairly flexible. I have sat on both conservation authorities in the past. But if somebody else wants to take it, to be quite honest with you, there's quite a long list of fill-ins that I'm doing. And so if somebody else would like it, that's fine with me. If not, I can take it.
Okay. Councillor Palashi has signaled that he'll accept the nomination. Do I have a seconder for that nomination? Councillor Innes? Okay, so we filled 2. That was for the TRCA?
Yes.
Okay, Growth Management. We now have 2, the Government Relations Committee. Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor Crombie, I think you kind of jumped the queue there on the, or you, it was a point of order, so we'll remove the. Oh, I'm done. You're done, I know. Councillor Gibson.
I was going to appoint or nominate Councillor Groves for TRCA.
Okay, we have a competition. Do we have a seconder for that nomination? Councillor Shaughnessy. Do we want to call the vote on that? I think we better, and then we'll take nominations for the other 2, for the Government Relations and the CVC. So are you going to handle the election? I do that? Oh, okey dokey. Glad my voting buttons don't work here. So this is for the TRCA. Do we take it alphabetically or in the order that the nominations were received? Okay, all those in favor of Councillor Palashi? Well, we don't have a nomination or seconder for Growth Management. There's no contest. Okay?
Did you want to give them an opportunity to speak to the nomination?
Do the candidates wish to speak to the nomination? Councillor Palashi?
Is that alphabetical or?
No, it's the order in which the nominations
Okay,
were
then I'll
received.
go first, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Just members of council, I think everybody knows that the city of Brampton is under utilized at the TRCA. Unfortunately, we missed an opportunity to have somebody appointed at the beginning of this council. We currently only have 1 member sitting on the TRCA when we're supposed to have 2. We've always had 2. So unfortunately, I would have put my name forward at the time. It did carry over to Councillor Mahoney, who stepped up and said that he would like to take the committee. I would love to have an ability to carry the torch from Councillor Tovey and have Brampton's fair share at TRCA. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the TRCA, we have a number of issues in my ward. There's a huge project in Bolton, the Bolton camp, that I've been actively involved with as well. And a number of other challenges with the TRCA. In our downtown core, we have a special policy area. It is in the floodplain. And it affects the redevelopment of that area in my ward, which has certainly been a huge challenge for Bolton and the businesses in that core. The TRCA is a committee that I actually wanted to sit on right at the get-go, but I had Councillor Innes had asked if she could sit on it, and I said fine. Now the opportunity's here. I would really like to get on that board because it does have a huge impact in my ward. Thank you.
Thank you. So we activate the voting buttons, and we'll call the vote for all those in favor of Councillor Palashi.
What does it take to carry the vote?
Mayor Crombie, are you going to vote? Okay.
Councillor Shaughnessy? got the majority.
So Councillor Paleshi, congratulations. You did get majority vote to be the representative. Congratulations. I don't think we need an acceptance speech on that. There is a position on the Government Relations Committee. So I'll take nominations for a representative on the Government Relations Committee. Okay, we have a nomination for Councillor Cook. Actually, I think it came from this side of the table. Mayor Crombie, you'll second it. Councillor Starr? I see no. Are there any other nominations for the Government Relations Committee? Seeing none, congratulations. We'll ratify the vote at the conclusion of all of the appointments. Credit Valley Conservation Authority. I need a nomination and a seconder. Nominating Councillor Cook. Seconded by Councillor Mahoney. No other nominations. Congratulations again. So, Madam Clerk,
Do they want to appoint somebody to the housing options for older adults for Peel?
okay. As the clerk indicated, it's not necessary to replace the,
Emergency management program?
okay, so there's two committees for which we do not need to make an appointment, but we can if we wish. One is the Emergency Management Program, and the other is the Housing Options for Older Adults in Peel. Is it council's desire to replace those positions? Moved by Councillor Parrish that we leave them vacated for the remainder of this term of office? Unless somebody wants to sit on them? Okay, you say yes now? Yes, so you're moving that the positions remain vacated for the remainder of the term of office. And it's been seconded by Councillor Raz. All those in favor of that? That's carried. And now I'll call a vote on the 4 appointments that were made that are printed on your screen. Councillor Carlson to the Growth Management, Councillor Cook to the Government Relations, Councillor Cook to the Hanlon Feeder Main, Councillor Cook to the Credit Valley Conservation, and Councillor Paleshi to the TRCA. And this is a recorded vote? And that's carried. Congratulations to everybody. We'll move, there are no notices of motion, bylaws.
Excuse me, is there any way that he can take over any other committee?
What do you want to give up?
If you want to hand in your resignation, we can do it at the next meeting, Councillor Starr. Councillor Anika?
Thank you. One other piece of other business. My apologies. I missed it at the start of the agenda. Item in camera 19.3 regards to legal matters. I am named, and I think my spouse is as well, from a historical point of view, something that's passed, but, so I don't think I have a conflict, but because I don't know what you're going to discuss in camera, out of an abundance of caution, I think I'm going to declare a conflict on that one as well, so that you can deliberate as you see fit. So I will be declaring a conflict on 19.3. I say, though it's a past event, I don't know where the conversation may go. Out of an abundance of caution, I'll declare a conflict on that one.
And
Thank
that's
you.
noted. Thank you. So I'll take a motion to move in camera. Councillor Medeiros, Councillor Miles, all those in favor? That's carried. Now, Madam Clerk, I read this.
Yep, we'll just leave the doors open.
Doors open. Okay, I need a mover and a seconder that the recommendations contained within the confidential reports related to 19.1 and 19.2 listed on the February 22nd, 2018 Regional Council agenda be approved and become part of the public upon adoption, and further that the report of the regional solicitor entitled Legal Advice Related to Holding Closed Meetings, Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, listed as item 19.3 on the February 22nd, 2018 Regional Council agenda, be received, and further that the in-camera direction given to the Acting Commissioner of Corporate Services related to item 19.4 be approved and voted upon in accordance with Section 239 of the Municipal Act. Moved by Councillor Pelletier, seconded by Councillor Starr. All those in favor? Oh, recorded vote. And that's carried. The confirming bylaw, that bylaw 11-2018, to confirm the proceedings of Regional Council at its meeting held on February 22nd, 2018, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region Appeal bylaws related thereto, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal affixed thereto, moved by Councillor Raz, seconded by Councillor Miles. All those in favor? That's carried. And now those three words we like to hear most. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Kovac.
Wait, just before we adjourn.
Before we adjourn.
Councillor Cook is wondering if he can stay here instead of having the shuffle of the seats. So he'd like that put to council.
Should I explain?
Yes.
Yes, what I'm suggesting is that my position here is an interim, and in order to put me into alphabetical order, it requires moving everybody one more around. And I'm wondering if you'd have any objections for me to just sit here.
Councillor Pelletier, or sorry, Councillor Parrish. I'll come back to you. Everybody want to stay put? Boy, you're batting 1,000 today. That's two things you got through, Council. Councillor Parrish.
Wanted the record to show the little red-haired girl from Brampton did a good job today.
Why, thank you. Thank you. And you all behaved very well. I'm impressed. Mover and seconder to adjourn. Councillor Mahoney, Councillor Fonseca, all those in favor? Carried. Have a good weekend, everybody.
And then I got parking passes and a couple of things for you.
Okay.
So here's the confirming bylaw.